Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Emily Longley. Emily Longley was born in England in 1994 to parents Mark and Caroline Longley. 2 years later, she welcomed her younger sister, Hannah. The sisters enjoyed a close relationship while growing up in a loving family. When Emily was 9 and Hannah was 7, the family relocated to Auckland, New Zealand. Unfortunately, after Emily began associating with the wrong crowd, her parents chose to send her back to the UK to live with her grandparents and start anew. In 2010, Emily traveled to England to study at Brockenhurst College. Her goal was to earn a business degree, and she aspired to be a model. While in England, she stayed at her grandparents' house in Bournemouth, a popular resort town located on the coast of the English Channel, near Poole. At the time of her move, Emily's sister Hannah was still in school. Their parents, Mark and Caroline, had divorced but continued to have a friendly relationship. Emily was a beautiful young woman who drew a lot of attention. One day, she met 20-year-old Elliot Turner, and he left a lasting impression on her. Over time, their communication developed into a romantic relationship. In April 2011, Emily traveled back to New Zealand to visit her family, whom she hadn't seen in 6 months. Her father greeted her at the airport, and she rushed to him, hugging him tightly and expressing how much she missed him. Emily shared that she had a very close bond with her father, who adored her and missed her smile, laughter, and playful jokes. The next day, the entire family visited Emily's favorite pizzeria. She shared with her parents that, in addition to her college studies, she was involved in modeling and had made some amazing friends. She also talked about her boyfriend, 20-year-old Elliot. Although they had only been dating for a few months, Emily felt she was too young for a serious relationship. "I think I'm going to break up with him when I return," she said. Over the following weeks, Emily enjoyed spending time with friends and family, creating great memories. No one realized that they would soon lose her. When Emily's flight began boarding, she found it difficult to say goodbye to her family. She promised them she would return in 5 months. During that time, she was excited to watch the Rugby World Cup starting on September 9th. A few days later, while texting her father, Emily mentioned that she had broken up with Elliot, but she chose not to share specific details. Elliot had been acting oddly after seeing photos Emily posted on social media from New Zealand, particularly because there were other guys in the pictures, which made him very jealous. Elliot Turner, a 20-year-old from a wealthy jewelry family, appeared to live a carefree life. He was well known in the bar and club scenes of Bournemouth and Poole and was part of a group of affluent young men known as the Firm. His friends nicknamed him All Talk Turner due to his tendency to brag. In December 2010, he met Emily, and they enjoyed a lavish lifestyle together, often staying out late. However, Elliot, who had a history of being obsessed with women, quickly became jealous, leading to frequent violent arguments in their relationship. People described him as threatening, aggressive, controlling, and possessive. In January 2008, when Elliot was 16 years old, the police sent him a warning letter about harassment. They advised him not to contact his ex-girlfriend after he inundated her with text messages and emails following their breakup. Elliot enjoyed being the center of attention and did not have to work since his parents financially supported him. He was skilled at manipulating others, including his parents, and his life centered on parties, women, alcohol, and drugs. He believed he was capable of doing anything he desired. Elliot always carries a hammer with him to intimidate anyone who might challenge him. His friends thought Elliot fancied himself a gangster. Elliot would often buy drinks for everyone at the bar. Elliot liked to brag about owning a new Mini Cooper, but it was actually a gift from his grandmother. He attempted to maintain his tough guy persona by posting streetwise messages on social media, where he often called himself Scarface or God. Although he attracted a lot of female attention, he became very attached to Emily when he met her. She praised his image as a successful person, something he worked hard to achieve. As their relationship progressed, Elliot began to display increasingly controlling behavior. He even threatened Emily, saying he would take her life. Emily wrote an emotional note to Elliot expressing her feelings. 1. I love you. 2. Please don't say you'll kill me. 3. Stop bringing up your ex-girlfriends. 4. Stop being so aggressive. Relax a bit, because that is much more attractive, and you scare me because you're so intimidating. As Elliot revealed his true nature and his controlling behavior escalated to an unacceptable level, Emily understood that he was not the right person for her. Then she decided to break up with him. Unfortunately, individuals like Elliot often cannot accept rejection. On the evening of May 6, 2011, Emily was out with friends at an entertainment venue. Surveillance footage showed her arriving at the nightclub with them. In another development, Elliot checked Emily's Facebook messages and found out she was seeing another man, which made him extremely angry. He went to the club and confronted Emily, leading to an argument. The situation escalated when Emily threw her drink at him. Elliot reacted by verbally abusing her and making threats of violence. He disapproved of Emily's outfit, claiming it was too revealing, and ignored the fact that they had broken up. Unwilling to accept the breakup, he continued to follow her after she decided to leave. His friends heard him say that he would kill her, that he would go to prison for it and still be a millionaire, and that serving 10 years in prison wouldn't bother him. Elliot convinced Emily to come to his house, saying he wanted to talk more relaxed. Elliot lived with his parents, which may have made Emily feel more at ease, thinking he would behave better around them. Neighbors observed them entering the house. The next morning, Anita Turner, Elliot's mother, called emergency services, reporting that Emily was unresponsive. The ambulance arrived around 9 a.m. Anita followed the nurse's instructions to help Emily, but unfortunately, when the paramedics arrived, they could only confirm Emily Longley had died. Anita, an Indonesian citizen, moved to the UK to marry Lee Turner. When they had a son, they gave him everything he wanted, which turned out to be a serious mistake. During a call with emergency services, Anita seemed surprisingly calm for a mother who had just discovered her son's girlfriend dead. Her demeanor was unsettlingly normal. Meanwhile, in New Zealand, Emily's father, Mark, woke up at 2 a.m. to find numerous missed calls from his ex-wife Caroline and their younger daughter Hannah. He also had a voicemail from Hannah, but she was talking something that difficult to understand. Then he heard Caroline screaming in the background, saying, "Emily is dead." Mark was in disbelief. He immediately called his mother in England. When she answered, his world shattered. She was crying uncontrollably. Soon after, a police officer took the phone and said, "I'm sorry to inform you that your daughter Emily is dead." Mark was stunned. Just a week ago, Emily had been on his couch, smiling. As he flew to the UK, the grieving father struggled to accept that his daughter was truly gone. Sadly, it was no dream. The loss of their eldest daughter was an immense heartbreak for Emily's parents. The police informed them that Emily had passed away in her sleep, which didn't make sense to them since she was so young and healthy. While the police gathered some evidence, the circumstances surrounding Emily's death remained unclear, and they would have to wait for the autopsy results. Elliot Turner's parents, Anita and Lee, told investigators that they had been at home all night and had not heard anything unusual. Meanwhile, Elliot shared his sorrow for Emily on social media by posting photos of them together. The police found no solid evidence to contradict the Turners' claim that Emily had mysteriously died in her sleep. In any death investigation, the crucial task is to determine the cause of death. Identifying the cause helps investigators understand the situation and how to approach the investigation. While they awaited the autopsy results, investigators discovered that a few days before her death, Emily had posted a concerning message on her Facebook page stating that she had a stalker. Emily detailed in phone calls she received, saying that someone had called her, and when she had asked who it was, they replied that she didn't know them, but they knew everything about her. She had asked how they got her number, and they said they would tell her when they saw her, while persistently asking her out. Emily had hung up, but they kept calling. She made this post on Thursday, May 5th. The police discovered that before her death, Emily had a heated argument with Elliot in front of other patrons at the nightclub. Interrogation with Elliot's friends revealed that he attempted to control Emily's actions and had learned about her meeting with another man. Most alarmingly, they mentioned that Elliot had threatened her life multiple times. However, his friends dismissed these threats, believing they were merely bravado to enhance his gangster image. The autopsy did not determine a definitive cause of death, but experts suggested that strangulation might have occurred, noting that the physical evidence was consistent with pressure applied to the neck. The investigators suspected that a member of the Turner family might be involved in Emily's death, which prompted them to install listening devices in their home. The police aimed to uncover any hidden information, and their suspicions were confirmed. One recording revealed that Elliot was advising his mother on how to interact with the police and what she should say. Lee Turner, Elliot's father, seemed to be the only one aware of the wrongdoing in their actions, but he eventually succumbed to the demands of his son and wife. While reviewing the recordings, investigators discovered details about Emily Longley's death. Elliot Turner confessed to causing her death, leading to his arrest a week later. Although he denied his guilt, his lawyers attempted to dispute the validity of the audio recordings. After thoroughly examining the case, the judge permitted the prosecution to present the recordings as evidence. Unaware that the police were listening, Elliot revealed that he felt angry every day and that Emily had upset him more than anyone else ever had. During the trial in May 2012, Elliot's lawyer argued that he acted in self-defense. Turner explained that a fight in his bedroom escalated, leading him to grab Emily by the neck. He insisted that he did not strangle her and claimed he discovered her dead in his bed the next morning. On the second day of the trial, Elliot expressed his disgust with his actions that night. It was reported that after finding Emily dead, he wrote a letter to his mother expressing his shame and mentioning that he was planning to leave for Spain. This suggests that Elliot intended to leave the country on the day Emily died but ultimately changed his mind for some unknown reason. When the police arrived at his house after receiving a call, they found packed bags, and Elliot had his passport in his pocket. In court, he admitted that he had threatened Emily and felt upset and deceived the night before her death after seeing emails on her phone. He claimed he had forcefully pushed her face into a table and recounted the fight they had before her death, stating that Emily began hitting him with her hands and feet. He attempted to calm her down but eventually gave up. When asked if he planned to kill Emily, Elliot said no. He claimed he thought Emily was asleep and only realized she was dead when she didn't wake up the next morning. In an interview with the Herald newspaper, Emily's father, Mark, expressed the pain of losing his daughter. The reality of death is that it's incredibly difficult. It doesn't matter if it's your child, partner, or even your 99-year-old grandmother, it's painful when someone is here one day and gone the next. This is something we struggle to cope with. All anniversaries are tough, birthdays are tough, Christmas is tough, and Easter is especially hard because that was the last time I truly spent time with her, Mark Longley shared. He shared that the hardest part is knowing he will never see the woman she could have been. I miss watching the life she was denied develop. We had a small but beautiful glimpse of the woman she was becoming, and I felt so proud of her. As her father, I'm naturally biased, but the world truly was a better and more enjoyable place with her in it. During the trial, Elliot Turner was depicted as a privileged young man whose parents tried to protect him from facing consequences. The court revealed that he had free access to his family's home in the wealthy Queen's Park neighborhood of Bournemouth. There, he hosted wild parties for his middle-class friends, as described by his father, Lee. To ensure he didn't bother them, his parents allowed him to use a converted garage as his own living space, giving him the freedom to come and go as he pleased. It was in this room, equipped with a mini bar, that he strangled Emily while they were on his bed. The jury quickly dispelled any illusions Elliot had when they found him guilty on May 22, 2012. The court sentenced him to life in prison, with a minimum term of 16 years. While delivering the verdict, Mrs. Justice Dost described Elliot as arrogant, stating, "Emily was a lovely girl who brought joy to others. You extinguished that light. You didn't love her, she was a trophy to you. The relationship was about your control through aggression and threats. Focus on your life sentence instead of luxury." She also sentenced Elliot to 9 months for perverting justice, to run concurrently. Elliot Turner wasn't the only one involved in the trial. His parents, Anita and Lee, were also implicated. They loved their son and tried to protect him after he committed his crime. Lee destroyed a letter in which Elliot confessed, while Anita removed a jacket from the room where the letter was supposedly found. Additionally, Anita delayed calling for an ambulance, allowing Elliot time to hide evidence and let the family create a credible story for the police. When questioned about her decision to postpone the call, Anita stated that she didn't believe Emily was dead. During cross-examination, they asked her if she believed Emily had ruined her son's life. After a 6-second pause, she answered, "No." In the recording, Lee inquired whether they had made the right decision. Anita responded, "We've done the right thing." Both Anita Turner, 51, and Lee Turner, 54, were found guilty of obstructing justice and received sentences of 27 months in prison. In 2013, after serving half of their sentence, they continue to live in the house where Emily tragically died. Emily's father, Mark, broke down while discussing the verdicts. With support from his ex-wife Caroline and daughter Hannah, he expressed, "What we have heard over these 5 weeks has shocked and disgusted us. It is beyond belief that a man as evil as Elliot could treat such a gentle and loving girl like Emily so violently. We are incredibly proud that she came all the way across the world to seek a better life for herself. Unfortunately, this is the life that Elliot chose to take from her." Mark mentioned that there was much discussion about Elliot's bragging, and no one took his threat seriously until it was too late. He noted that even his mother dismissed it when he texted her about his intention to harm Emily. In October 2020, reports emerged that Elliot Turner's cellmates had assaulted him in prison. This incident followed his decision to display photos of Emily in his cell and brag about receiving letters from female admirers. The attack was triggered after he claimed he would soon go back to his luxurious lifestyle filled with champagne, Bentleys, and attractive women. In 5 years, Elliot Turner will be eligible to apply for early release. We can only hope that the parole board will act wisely and make the right choice concerning someone who has shown no remorse for his actions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rowan Ford. Rowan Ford was born on April 11, 1998, in San Diego, California. When she was young, her parents divorced, and her mother, Colleen, moved with her to a small town called Stella, Missouri. Colleen later met a man named David, and they married. Colleen already had several children from a previous marriage, and soon after their marriage, she and David had a daughter together. Rowan has 2 older sisters and 2 older brothers, and they are very close. She enjoys spending time outdoors, biking around town, swimming, and pursuing her passion for painting. She also enjoys attending Sunday school at her local church, where she often volunteers to help children who are having trouble with their homework. In November 2007, when Rowan was 9 years old, she was in 4th grade at her local elementary school. Her mother worked the night shift at a store, while her stepfather was often at the farm during the day. As a result, Rowan was often left to fend for herself, which helped her become very independent. On November 2nd, she was home alone, as usual. Colleen went to work, and her stepfather had not yet returned from the farm. The next morning, around 9 o'clock, Colleen returned home from her night shift and checked Rowan's room, but her daughter was not there. She asked her husband if he knew where Rowan was, and he told her that Rowan had asked him if she could stay the night at a friend's house. He agreed without asking the friend's name, since their town was small and he wasn't worried about her safety. Colleen felt worried and decided to ask all of Rowan's friends. Since their town only had a few streets, this didn't take long. However, none of Rowan's friends had seen her, and she had not spent the night at any of their homes. This made her mother even more anxious. Colleen searched all over town but could not find her daughter. She finally returned home and told her husband that Rowan was missing. She asked him to contact the police to report the incident, but he assured her that everything was fine and that Rowan would be home soon. After waiting for a few more hours without seeing Rowan, Colleen decided to call 911 and take matters into her own hands. The local sheriff immediately organized a search operation. He went to Colleen's house to interview David, the last person to see Rowan before she disappeared. David said that he had been working on the farm with his co-worker Christopher that evening when Nathan, a mutual friend of theirs, came to visit. They decided to go to David's house to drink and play pool. They stopped by the store to buy some alcohol before heading to David's house, where they stayed for a few hours. That night, Christopher asked Nathan to drive him to a nearby town to pick up car. They convinced David to join them to continue their party. Before leaving the house, Christopher checked to see if Rowan was asleep in her room and found her already asleep. After David left with his friends, they stopped at a store to buy more alcohol and then went to Christopher's trailer, where they continued drinking for about an hour. David then decided to go home and asked Nathan for a ride. Nathan agreed but chose to take a detour rather than the highway, as he was quite drunk and did not want to get in trouble with the police. Nathan dropped David off and drove home, while David went straight to bed. Shortly after, Rowan woke him up and asked if she could stay the night at a friend's house. Without thinking much of it, he agreed and fell asleep. The police approached the case with suspicion. What puzzled them most was that a 9-year-old girl would decide to go to a friend's house in the middle of the night, especially since her stepfather had not asked about the friend she was visiting. The police chief suspected that David might be hiding something or had something to do with Rowan's disappearance, but there was no evidence to support this suspicion. The police searched the town and the surrounding area until late at night. Locals quickly joined the search because they knew the Rowan family and wanted to help. Stella had a population of only about 150, so news of Rowan's disappearance spread rapidly throughout the area. Locals usually felt safe letting their children play outside, as there was not much going on in such a peaceful place. However, when Rowan disappeared without a trace and the police could not find her throughout the day, the people of Stella became extremely panicked. On the first day of the search, nothing was found. Then, on November 4th, the police went to the neighboring town and spoke to Christopher, who confirmed David's story. However, Christopher added that his friend had not contacted him since that evening, and he had only learned of Rowan's disappearance that same day. The police expanded the search and brought in more volunteers, but they still could not find Rowan or any clues regarding her whereabouts. The next morning, the FBI joined the investigation while local police continued to search for Rowan in the area around town. Detectives focused on the possibility of kidnapping. They strongly doubted the David story, as it seemed very suspicious. The police also checked with all of Rowan's friends and confirmed that she had not visited any of them that night. Investigators interviewed David several times, and his testimony varied in detail, further raising suspicions about his involvement. For example, he provided different times for being away that night and even stated that Rowan may not have asked him before going to visit a friend. FBI agents further discovered that on the night of her missing, David had asked his mother to lend him her car, although he had not initially disclosed this to the police. As a result, the police seized both cars for testing, but experts found no evidence. Detectives continued discussions with Christopher and Nathan, as both were with David that night. Christopher was invited to the police station and told the same story as the day before. He also agreed to take a polygraph test, which showed no signs of deception. A few hours after Christopher left the station and returned to work, he saw Chief Clark's car. Christopher signaled for Chief Clark to stop. Sheriff Clark is the police chief in the town of Witten and has known Christopher for 17 years, since Christopher was a child. Clark was a friend of Christopher's adoptive parents, and Christopher had always respected him. He often turned to him for advice or help in times of trouble. Sheriff Clark contacted Christopher, and they discussed Rowan's disappearance. Clark was aware of the case but was not directly involved, as the search was being handled by the Stella Police Department. During their conversation, Clark suspected that Christopher was withholding information, as Rowan's life was in danger and her fate was still uncertain. Therefore, Clark decided to share these suspicions with the FBI, contacting agents to explain his concerns. Investigators suspect that Christopher may be withholding important information about Rowan's disappearance, which could implicate her stepfather. It is possible that he asked Christopher to lie and alter some details in his account of the events of that night. Christopher now fears that he will be considered an accomplice if he tells the truth. Sheriff Clark informed the FBI agents that he had a good and trusting relationship with Christopher, so he wanted to help convince him to share information. That same day, Christopher went to Colleen's home to ask her about the progress of the search. Simultaneously, the FBI agents also visited Rowan's mother again. When they met with Christopher, they continued to ask him a few questions, and he once again confirmed that the events of that night happened exactly as he had described them. However, this time he also mentioned that he did not rule out the possibility that David was involved in Rowan's disappearance and expressed his desire to help them find the truth, no matter how frightening it might be. He suggested wearing a wiretap and approaching David to try to get him to confess. However, the detectives decided not to use such tactics. Instead, they asked Christopher if he could think of any locations where his friend might have hidden Rowan's body, and he suggested several places. The next day, the police began investigating these locations while continuing to search the area around Stella's house. FBI agents once again brought David in for questioning, but he repeatedly denied any involvement. Detectives also searched David's house in the hope of finding clues, but nothing was discovered. On November 7th, the police asked Christopher to return to the station to obtain his consent to search the safe in David's home. Christopher had been living with David for several months due to not having his own place, and some of his belongings were still there. Christopher gave the police permission to search the safe, his trailer, and his car. He also voluntarily provided a DNA sample and agreed to answer additional questions from the detectives. They began questioning him that evening and again asked him to confirm David's story. This time, however, Christopher suddenly admitted that his friend's story was not entirely true. The investigators began to pressure him to tell them what really happened. This pressure caused Christopher to become agitated. He said that if the police were going to treat him like a criminal and try to implicate him in Rowan's disappearance, he would not continue the conversation. The detectives then had to end the interview, and Christopher left the station. That night, he went to see Chief Clark and told him the whole story. He complained that the detectives were treating him as a suspect and said that he might need to hire a lawyer. The chief replied that it was his right, but asked him to understand that the police were only doing what they could to find Rowan. In response, Christopher stated that he would not speak to them anymore and that if he wanted to share any more information, he would only speak to Sheriff Clark. He continued to persuade Christopher to share what he knew. After a while, Christopher began to cry and said that he had always loved Rowan and would never hurt her. During his time living in David's house, Christopher developed a close relationship with Rowan and the other children. They began to consider him a member of the family and even called him Uncle Christopher. Sheriff Clark realized that Christopher was about to reveal everything he knew. However, just as Christopher was about to share, someone came to the police station, causing Sheriff Clark to temporarily lose focus. Christopher then left the office without revealing what he was about to say. Sheriff Clark eventually contacted the FBI and informed them about the conversation. He explained that Christopher was willing to share most of what he knew, but warned that if he was pressed too hard, Christopher might refuse to talk and seek legal counsel. Clark offered to give Christopher time to think it over, and the detectives agreed. The search for Rowan continued the next day without success. However, the situation changed on November 9th, a week after Rowan went missing. Search parties found Rowan's body in a remote area near a town called Powell, about 10 miles from where Stella lived. The body was covered in leaves and debris, with only a sock remaining. Medical examiners determined that Rowan had been strangled and sexually assaulted. Shortly after the body was discovered, FBI agents contacted Chief Clark and asked him to speak with Christopher again, hoping he would reveal more information. The chief learned that Christopher had come to the police station earlier that morning when Chief Clark was not there and had informed other officers that he urgently needed to see him. The chief searched everywhere for Christopher but could not find him. Christopher then contacted Chief Clark himself. He expressed obvious distress and concern that he was being followed. He explained that after hearing about the discovery of Rowan's body, he had driven around town to calm down and had noticed a gray car following him. Chief Clark claimed to be unaware of any surveillance activity and asked to meet Christopher directly. When Christopher met with the investigators, he expressed concern for his safety. He feared that after the discovery of Rowan's body, he might be charged with murder and that someone would take revenge on him. Clark took him to the police station and explained that now that the case had been ruled a murder, it was time for him to reveal everything he knew. Christopher began to cry. The sheriff asked him to tell him what David had done to Rowan. Christopher said that there were too many people at the police station and that he did not want to discuss it there. He suggested going to a quieter place and mentioned a small bridge a few miles from their town. The sheriff agreed, and they drove there together. As they got out of the car, Christopher suddenly raised his hands and asked the police to handcuff him. The sheriff was surprised and said that it was unnecessary, but Christopher insisted that after what he had said, the police had to do so. Christopher then began to recount the story he had told the police many times. He went to his trailer with Nathan and David, where they continued drinking. After a while, his friends decided to go home, and David asked Nathan to drive them. They said they would take a detour to avoid the police. However, Christopher then suddenly announced that he wanted to sexually assault Rowan and that he planned to do so. Knowing that it would take his friends a long time to take a detour through the fields, he drove straight to David's house on the main highway. He then barged into Rowan's room, picked her up, and carried her to his car, intending not to wake her. Christopher then took Rowan to his trailer, where he assaulted her. According to Christopher, Rowan had just woken up and tried to resist but was unable to escape. Christopher did not turn on the lights or talk to Rowan because he did not want her to recognize him. After committing this act, Christopher intended to take Rowan home and leave. But the plan did not go as intended. When Christopher carried Rowan out of the trailer, The moon was shining brightly, and Rowan saw Christopher's face clearly. Panicking, Christopher grabbed a rope and strangled her. When she died, he loaded her body into the car and began to think about what to do next. Initially, he wanted to throw her off the bridge, the same bridge where he stood with Sheriff Clark, but he realized her body would be found too quickly. So, he got into the driver's seat and started driving around the county, considering other options. Soon, he remembered a large pit near a neighboring town and headed there. He threw the victim's body into the pit and tried to cover it with branches, but the pit was too large to cover completely. When he returned to the car, he noticed traces of Rowan's blood on his clothes and the mattress. Christopher realized he needed to get rid of the pants, underwear, and rope used to kill the victim. He gathered all of these items and planned to put them in a large barrel to burn. However, Christopher quickly realized that such a fire would certainly attract attention, so he dragged the barrel into the shed, closed the door, and set it on fire. Sheriff Clark was surprised by this story. He had previously believed that David had committed the crime and that Christopher was just hiding some information. It was hard to believe that a man he had known for nearly 20 years could be so brutal. Christopher had 3 young children, and although he had not lived with them since his divorce, he had always seemed like a nice man. But the truth was much colder. After Christopher finished telling his story, he voluntarily went to the police station. The sheriff did not handcuff him. It was only after they arrived and the man repeated his confession to the FBI agents that he was arrested for murder. Christopher also signed a voluntary consent form to allow his trailer and car to be searched. He eventually said that he regretted his actions and cried like a baby all the next day. Investigators went to inform David that Christopher had confessed to the murder. Based on David's behavior and inconsistent statements, they suspected that he might have been protecting his friend. However, they discovered something even more shocking. When brought in for questioning, David changed his testimony of events. According to David's testimony, when he came home and found Rowan not in her room, he suspected that Christopher might have kidnapped her. So he took his mother's car and drove to Christopher's trailer. When David entered the trailer, he found her lying on the bed with Christopher. Instead of saving Rowan, David decided to join in and bully her as well. David then helped his friend dispose of the body. He stated that throughout the incident, he was shocked and could not remember anything that happened. The detectives, who were initially surprised by this incident, contacted Christopher again to confirm David's statement. However, Christopher insisted that his friend was not involved and that everything happened exactly as he had previously said. This further confused the detectives, but Christopher's statement was consistent with the facts. A medical expert confirmed that Rowan had been strangled with a thin wire, a detail that only the killer would know. During the search of the trailer, the police found a container of ashes. In addition, they found a hair in the trailer that matched Rowan's. Although investigators were unable to determine who was telling the truth, both men made accusations against one another. As a result, David was also arrested, and both cases went to trial. During the trial, Christopher requested that all of his statements be removed from the record, arguing that he did not know they could be used against him and that the police had violated his rights. However, the judge rejected this request because all of his conversations with investigators had been completely voluntary. Christopher also tried to explain the difficult circumstances of his childhood. He had experienced many family changes since he was young, which had a significant impact on his development. Christopher also saw a specialist who confirmed that he exhibited signs of developmental problems but could not help him avoid punishment. In 2012, 5 years after the murder, he was sentenced to death. He attempted to appeal the conviction but was unsuccessful. For David, the situation was much more complicated. He admitted to attacking and killing Rowan, but his testimony contradicted Christopher's. If the prosecution decided to charge David with murder, Christopher's conviction would likely be overturned, and David could also evade responsibility because there was no solid evidence against him, such as DNA. The prosecution could not afford to make such a risky claim. In fact, they were still uncertain about David's involvement in the case. They did not rule out the possibility that David had committed the crime alongside Christopher, but there was no evidence to support this theory. In the end, a difficult decision was made. To avoid the risk of overturning Christopher's conviction, they reduced David's charges to significantly lesser ones. David pleaded guilty to 2 counts, child endangerment and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison, with a minimum of 5 years to serve. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Angie Houseman. Angie Houseman was born on February 18, 1984, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her father left the family before she was born, and she would never have the chance to meet him. However, her mother married a man named Ronald when she was 1 year old, and in the addition of a younger brother to the family. The 2 sisters got along very well, with Angie particularly fond of her younger brother. Angie was known for her friendly and outgoing personality, always striving to build relationships with those around her. Her family resided in a peaceful suburban neighborhood in St. Louis. In 1993, at the age of 9, Angie attended the 4th grade at a local elementary school, about a mile away from her home. Her daily go-to-school involved taking a bus from a nearby stop, which her parents considered relatively safe due to its proximity to their house. Typically, Angie and her neighborhood friends walked together from the school to the bus stop after class. There were many parents watching from their windows to ensure their safety. This has become a habit in their neighborhood, intended to provide peace of mind that children will return home safely. On November 18th, Angie followed her usual routine, attending school and finishing at 3 p.m. She took the school bus home with a few neighborhood kids. At that point, the other kids continued to their homes. Angie walked alone the short remaining distance home, because her house was farther away. However, Angie didn't arrive home, and as the minutes passed, her parents started to worry. They knew Angie often chatted with friends on her way home, but it has never taken this long. Concerned, Angie's mom and stepdad decided to walk along her route from the house to the bus stop to see if they could find her. While walking, they met other kids from Angie's school. They confirmed she had gotten off the bus with them and headed in the direction of her home. The parents also spoke with neighbors who usually kept an eye on the kids, but were preoccupied on that particular day and hadn't seen anything. Angie's parents became more and more worried and insecure. They and their friends started searching the area along her route from the bus stop to their home. As the sun began to set and darkness fell, they didn't give up. Realizing Angie was unlikely to wander off in the cold weather, the parents eventually decided to call the police. The police immediately joined the search for Angie. Due to the cold weather, it seemed unlikely that she would wander off alone. Therefore, the police initially focused on investigating whether she had been kidnapped. 10 days before Angie went missing, an 11-year-old girl was almost kidnapped in a nearby area, which made everyone even more concerned. An unknown person approached the girl as she got off the school bus and attempted to pull her into the bushes. Fortunately, she managed to escape. However, since the assailant was still at large, the police believed he might be linked to Angie's disappearance. To investigate, officers deployed K9 units, which detected Angie's scent near the bus stop. The dogs tracked the scent about halfway to her house, but lost it suddenly, suggesting that Angie might have gotten into a vehicle at that location, which further supported the possibility of an abduction. The police expanded their search for Angie by deploying helicopters with thermal sensors and scouring the banks of a nearby stream, but they failed to locate either the girl or her belongings. The first day, the search turned up no results. As the investigation unfolded, the police released information about Angie's disappearance to the media, which quickly spread throughout the city. The police department receiving over 300 calls within 24 hours. To manage the influx of leads, more than 20 additional officers were assigned to the case. However, none of these clues were helpful in finding Angie. The detectives pursued every lead, with a strong focus on Angie's stepfather from the beginning. Despite this, he insisted he was innocent and willingly cooperated with the investigation, even agreeing to take a lie detector test in an effort to clear his name and help the police focus on finding Angie. During the investigation into Angie's biological father, a new piece of information came to light. Although he had never been in direct contact with his daughter, but the biological father had allegedly driven past her house multiple times to watch her play outside, according to Angie's mother. While detectives found this behavior suspicious, the biological father had a solid alibi that checked out. By the third day, the FBI joined the investigation, and the police department allocated even more officers to the case. It was clear to everyone that something serious had happened to Angie, as she could barely survive on the streets in such harsh weather conditions. A break in the case came when a witness in Angie's neighborhood reported seeing a suspicious man driving a blue sedan. The description matched a person who had attempted to abduct a girl just 10 days earlier. Based on this, investigators created a composite sketch, which was featured in the media and appearing on thousands of distributed flyers. Unfortunately, the identity of the suspect remained a mystery. As Angie's disappearance gained national attention through television, the number of leads increased. Police carefully evaluated each one but found no connections to the case. However, as the case drew more public attention, psychics started contacting Angie's family, claiming to have had visions of the missing girl. One psychic even named a specific location, a large national park 25 miles from Angie's home, where they believed she was being held. However, detectives chose not to pursue this information. To encourage tips, a $10,000 reward was offered for any information about Angie's location, resulting in an influx of tips. During the investigation, detectives discovered a disturbing detail. A few days before she disappeared, Angie mentioned to her teacher that she would be going on a nature trip with her uncle. However, this statement raised red flags, as Angie did not actually have an uncle, and her parents were unaware of what she meant by this claim. Detectives considered the possibility that Angie might have known the person who took her, referring to them as her uncle in conversation. Despite their efforts, investigators failed to uncover any information about this mysterious individual in the days that followed. The case seemed to be at a standstill until 9 days after Angie's disappearance, on November 27th. A young girl's body was discovered near a tree, severely mistreated. She had no clothing on and was bound with handcuffs. Her head was completely covered in tape, except for a small exposed area around her nose. A nearby bag contained personal items, including notebooks with her name, that confirmed the body was that of Angie. Autopsies by medical examiners revealed more disturbing details about Angie's death. A piece of underwear was found stuffed in her mouth after the tape on her head was removed. The investigation determined that she had died just hours before her discovery and had likely been held captive for 9 days before succumbing. Furthermore, experts concluded that Angie suffered numerous physical injuries and endured a sexual assault. A thorough examination of the crime scene by forensic experts led to the discovery of a fingerprint on the tape used to cover Angie's head. The police tried to find matching information in the database and between several suspects, but didn't bring any clues. Following the discovery of the body, the police increased their efforts in the investigation. As news of the tragic incident spread, local residents became fearful, increasing their vigilance. To protect their children, they started escorting them to and from school, meeting them at bus stops, and keeping a close watch over them at all times. On December 1st, a 10-year-old girl named Casey Dissa went missing in a nearby town, just 10 miles from Angie's house. Casey had received permission from her mother to visit friends who lived a short distance away, but she never made it to their home. The police were unsuccessful in locating her, fueling the detectives' fear that they might be dealing with a serial killer. Initially, detectives did not rule out the possibility that the same person was responsible for both Angie's and Casey's disappearances. However, they lacked evidence to support this theory. 10 days later, Casey's body was found in St. Louis, wrapped in bedding in the curtain. The cause of death was determined to be severe head trauma from multiple blows. Despite the investigation, detectives were unable to uncover any leads pointing to the killer. Furthermore, the distinct nature of the two crimes led them to reconsider their initial theory. As a result, they began to consider the possibility of two separate murderers in the same month. Investigations into Angie's disappearance led detectives to identify a man who had attempted to abduct another girl a few days earlier. The suspect, 37-year-old Gary, frequently traveled to St. Louis for work. Although he became a person of interest in the murders of Angie and Casey, he had a solid alibi for the time they went missing. However, during questioning, Gary admitted to assaulting 4 other girls and was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison. The following February, the case took a new turn. Near where Casey's body was found, investigators found tire tracks that were associated with a pickup truck from a well-known rental car company known for its distinctive logo. Detectives showed photos of the tire tracks to locals, asking if they had seen a pickup truck from that company in the area. The detectives received a crucial lead. One woman came forward, saying she had seen such a pickup near her neighbor's house about a week after Casey's disappearance. After investigation, the police discovered that the house belonged to a woman living with her husband and brother. She claimed none of them had rented the pickup and maintained they were not connected to the case. However, detectives remained skeptical and obtained a search warrant for the house. The search revealed blood matching Casey's in the basement, along with the murder weapon. A further investigation uncovered key information in Casey's case. The pickup truck used to transport the body was rented by Thomas, the brother of the woman who owned the house. Initially, Thomas denied any involvement in the crime. However, when presented with the existing evidence, he eventually confessed. According to Thomas's statement, Casey knocked on his door and wanted to invite his nephews to come out with her. Thomas invited Casey into the house and led her to the basement, where he attempted to assault her. When Casey screamed, Thomas hit her with a heavy object, ultimately killing her. He then covered her body with bed sheets. Despite committing the crime, Thomas went to work as usual. Upon returning home, Thomas' sister told him that she had discovered the body in the basement, but she didn't want to know what had happened and asked that it be disposed of quickly. Casey's body remained in the basement for a week because outside, the search was still going on for her. Thomas was too afraid to move Casey's body until the investigation died down. Once the situation became less intense, Thomas rented a pickup truck, transported Casey's body to St. Louis, and abandoned it there. Thomas was eventually convicted of Casey's murder and received a death sentence. However, he died in prison several years later due to illnesses before the sentence could be carried out. During the investigation, Thomas denied any connection to Angie's case, leading detectives to believe that the two cases were not connected. The investigation into Angie's murder stagnated for many months, with the number of leads dwindling over time. Years later, detectives encountered a new obstacle: the expiration of the reward for providing information, which detectives feared would decrease public involvement. However, a local businessman donated $250,000 to incentivize people to come forward with information. This bonus was one of the biggest at the time, generated a large number of tips, but disappointingly, the case remains unsolved. In 2001, a prison inmate named Corey Fox contacted detectives and confessed to over 10 murders, including the murder of Angie Houseman. Detectives met with Corey, then he recounted how he and an accomplice abducted Angie from the street and held her captive in his house for several days. Initially, the plan was to demand a ransom in exchange for Angie's safe return. However, Corey and his accomplice became concerned that they might be identified and decided to murder her. Corey provided detectives with many accurate details about the crime, including the fact that Angie was tied to a tree and that his accomplice used her underwear as a gag. However, some discrepancies arose during the questioning, particularly with regards to how Angie was restrained. Corey claimed that they used plastic handcuffs, but evidence showed that perpetrator actually used iron handcuffs. Furthermore, investigators discovered that Corey could not have committed some of the murders he confessed to. As a result, police concluded that he likely fabricated parts of his confession, possibly drawing information from media of Angie's case. In the summer of 2002, when a 6-year-old girl was abducted from her home and murdered in a different St. Louis neighborhood, authorities initially considered whether the two crimes were connected, but this theory proved unfounded. The killer, a neighbor, was quickly caught and confessed during questioning. The investigation into Angie's case lay dormant for several years, until 2007, when detectives reopened the file. Upon reviewing the case documents, they stumbled upon a noteworthy detail. Shortly after Angie's body was discovered, police had found a man named Roger Martin sitting in a parked car nearby. When questioned about his emergence, Roger claimed he was in the area to go hunting. However, a search of his vehicle revealed no hunting equipment, raising suspicions about his true intentions. The new detective team decided to investigate Roger further, which revealed his prior convictions for crimes against children. Notably, one of his past victims was assaulted near the area where Angie's body was discovered. All of these crimes happened before Angie's death, but the police had failed to thoroughly look into Roger at the time. This meant that the new team had to start over from the beginning. The detectives brought Roger in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in Angie's murder. He claimed that he just happened to be near that location. The interrogation lasted 9 hours, but still yielded no new clues. The police compared Roger's fingerprints with the ones on the tape found on Angie's head, but the experts found that they did not match. As a result, Roger was released. Although the police continued to consider him a suspect, they lacked sufficient evidence to hold him. The case of Angie saw a breakthrough in 2018, when the St. Louis Police Department created a task force specifically to investigate this case. With the advancement of technology, the detectives re-examined the existing evidence, searching for new leads. Their investigation centered on 3 crucial pieces of evidence: the handcuffs, the tape from Angie's head, and her underwear used as a gag. Despite repeated efforts since 1993, experts had struggled to detect the perpetrator's DNA on these items. The task force decided to re-examine the evidence with modern technology. The detectives first focused on the handcuffs but encountered a difficulty due to the presence of Angie's blood covering almost the entire surface. Next, they turned their attention to the tape from Angie's head, but faced another obstacle. Upon opening the box containing the evidence, they discovered that the tape had deteriorated significantly over time. Finally, they examined the underwear that had been used to gag Angie. Although they did not have much hope for this evidence, since it had been in her mouth for hours, so it was likely that any foreign DNA had been removed. However, they still investigated it as a last resort. Using advanced technology, they carefully examined every inch of the underwear, leading to a breakthrough. A small sample of DNA was found, sufficient for analysis. The experts confirmed the DNA belonged to a male and immediately uploaded it to the FBI database. Although it is common for DNA searches to yield no matches, requiring additional investigation, the detectives were fortunate in this case. As soon as the DNA sample was uploaded, they received a full match. The DNA belonged to 58-year-old Earl Cox, who had been incarcerated since 2003. In the investigation into Angie's case, Earl Cox initially had not been on the police's radar, but his criminal record was substantial. His history of crime dated back to 1982, when he was serving in the military in Germany and working as a part-time babysitter. 4 girls reported being sexually assaulted by Earl, resulting in an 8-year prison sentence in the United States. He was subsequently discharged from the Army after serving only 3 years. Earl was released from prison early and moved to St. Louis. However, 4 years later, he found himself in trouble with the law again. In this instance, he was arrested after 2 7-year-old girls accused him of sexually assaulting them. Although the charges were eventually dropped due to a lack of evidence, the arrest itself was a parole violation. As a result, Earl received an additional year in prison. After serving this extra year, Earl was released in 1992 and settled in St. Louis, where his relatives lived. The following year, a tragic incident happened. Earl abducted and killed Angie. In 2002, Earl was arrested again for operating a secret online platform where individuals shared child abuse content. The FBI had been monitoring his activities and set a trap by having an undercover agent pose as a 14-year-old girl and make contact with him. Earl made explicit intentions to exploit the girl and sent money for her to meet him. However, when Earl showed up at the meeting place, he was met by armed FBI agents instead of the girl. This led to his arrest. A search of his computer revealed a massive collection of over 45,000 images of child abuse. Further investigation also revealed that Earl was the mastermind behind the platform, leading to the arrest of 60 more individuals associated with the site. This operation was one of the largest against pedophiles in the country. In 2003, Earl was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, when his sentence ended, a judge used a legal loophole to keep Earl in detention, citing him as a serious threat to children. As a result, Earl remained in prison. In 2019, a DNA match linked Earl to Angie Hausman's case. Detectives visited him in prison, but Earl denied involvement and requested a lawyer. Despite the strong DNA evidence, investigators took an alternative approach. They offered Earl's lawyer a deal. In exchange for Earl's confession, the prosecution would drop the death penalty and pursue a life sentence instead. Earl agreed, likely aware that he would lose the case in court. When detectives returned to the prison, Earl shared his account of incident. Although some details raised suspicions, his admission to the murder was the key point for investigators. Earl claimed that on November 18, 1993, he was driving through his family's neighborhood when his car broke down. And while he was trying to find out what was wrong with the car, a school bus pulled up and children disembarked. While the others went home, Angie remained outside, drawing Earl's attention. Earl claimed that when Angie approached him, they had a brief chat, and he noticed she seemed extremely cold. He offered her a ride in his car, which she allegedly accepted. Earl then took Angie to Burger King to get food, and afterwards, took her to his home. Here, he sexually assaulted her for several days. Eventually, Earl decided to dispose of Angie, drove her to a remote location, where her body was later found, and tied her to a tree. However, she was still alive at that time. Detectives had doubts about certain parts of Earl's story. They didn't think Angie would agree to go anywhere with a stranger, especially since she only had a short distance to walk home. Investigators have questioned Earl's story about the car breakdown, as he claimed the car stalled but started again as soon as Angie approached. It seems more likely that Earl saw Angie and decided to abduct her. A more probable scenario is that he lured her into the car by lying or threatening her. This is more credible than his confession. Detectives were to obtain the confession they needed for the murder. Earl Cox was sentenced to life in prison without parole by a judge in August 2020. Although justice had been served, it came too late for Angie's mother, who had passed away from cancer in 2016. Her husband, Ronald, felt that Cox's actions had indirectly contributed to her death. As her grief over losing Angie had weakened her health and will to live, ultimately leading to her passing. For Earl, his sentence was more than just the initial verdict. Authorities re-examined a previous case of sexual abuse involving two 7-year-old girls, for which Earl had initially received a lenient sentence. At that time, he had only spent 1 year in prison for violating his parole. However, years later, investigators contacted one of his victims, now an adult, and asked for her testimony against him. Faced with the of a life sentence, Earl chose to plead guilty and as a result, received an additional 10-year prison sentence. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Candy Rogers. Candace Rogers, also known as Candy, was born on July 18, 1948, was either. After her birth, her parents divorced, but her father remained in the same city, allowing Candy to spend time with him regularly. As a child, she enjoyed the outdoors, often going for walks and playing with her dog. She also dreamed of joining the Campfire Girls, a girls-only organization similar to the Boy Scouts. In 1959, Candy joined the Campfire Girls at the age of 9. One of the organization's activities was selling mints door-to-door. On Friday, March 6th, she planned to sell mints after school. After returning home, having dinner, and playing with her dog. Then she took about 8 boxes of mints and headed out. Candy had planned to walk around her neighborhood and sell sweets to the people living nearby. To ensure that the other girls selling sweets in the area didn't overlap, each girl was assigned specific streets to visit. However, when Candy failed to return home by her expected time of 6 p.m., her mom started to worry. Candy's mom and grandfather set out to search for her, but they couldn't find her anywhere in the neighborhood. As darkness fell, the search party grew, with family, friends and neighbors joining in to help. Despite their combined efforts, they were unable to find any sign of Candy. Convinced that something was wrong, Candy's mom decided to call the police. As the police joined the search, they began by questioning the neighbors. Their investigation revealed that she had only made one sale, suggesting that something may have happened to her soon after she left home. A witness reported seeing Candy on a nearby street around 6:30 p.m., which seemed unusual since her mother was already searching for her by then. Candy's grandfather reported some unusual incidents after going to search for his granddaughter. On the same street where a witness last saw Candy, he nearly got hit by a speeding green 1956 Ford. Although the police distributed the car's description, they were unable to locate it due to the lack of a license plate number. Later, at around 9 p.m., several mint boxes belonging to Candy were found along the road near a bridge, increasing the concern for her safety. The police intensified their search in this area, combing the riverbanks and a nearby wooded zone throughout the night. Unfortunately, Candy was not found. As news of Candy's disappearance spread, local newspapers covered the story, and it eventually gained statewide media attention. In 1959, child disappearances near their homes were extremely rare, making Candy's case even more disturbing. The residents of her town had not experienced a similar incident in many years, leaving them deeply shaken and concerned. The next morning, police increased their search by deploying more personnel and resources, including mounted police, off-road vehicles, and military members. A large number of volunteers from the city and surrounding areas joined the search, swelling the total number of search to over 1,000 people. This made it one of the largest searches in the country's history at the time. The search area was expanded to 11 miles around Candy's home, but despite this, no signs of her were found. Tragically, on the same day, a search helicopter clipped power lines and crashed, claiming the lives of 3 of its 5 crew members. Undeterred, the search efforts continued for many days, but yielded no results. Police officers worked tirelessly in multiple day and night to try and locate Candy. Investigators also followed up on approximately 750 tips received in the early days of the search, but unfortunately, every lead ended in a dead end. 15 days after Candy went missing, 2 military personnel on a hunting trip in the woods west of Spokane stumbled upon children's shoes on the ground. Recognizing the shoes as possibly belonging to Candy, they immediately reported their discovery to the police. The shoes were confirmed by Candy's grandfather. He said they were indeed hers. After discovering this clue, police conducted a search of the woods and they quickly found Candy's body, partially hidden in the underbrush and covered with pine branches. A medical examination revealed that the cause of death was strangulation, using a torn piece of fabric from Candy's own skirt. Injuries on Candy's hands and feet suggested that she had been tied up, although no ropes were found near. The police investigation showed that Candy had been sexually abused. During their search of the crime scene, the police discovered a green car seat cover nearby, although they were unable to establish if it was linked to the murder. A small, purple stain was also found on Candy's clothing, which gave off a strong scent of grape-flavored chewing gum. Despite all efforts, the police still could not find relevance between this stain and the case. With limited clues, police searched for any clues that might help them find the killer. They thoroughly investigated numerous tips and looked into the potential involvement of hundreds of people. This group included neighbors, people of interest, and previously convicted individuals. However, the investigation eventually narrowed down to focus on one particular suspect, Alfred Braves, a 50-year-old man. The reason Alfred became a suspect because, on the same day Candy's body was found, he died in his car, near where Candy's boxes of mints were found. Additionally, Alfred lived near Candy's home. Upon finding his body, police discovered a rope and a strand of hair that was not Alfred's, which belonged to a woman. Investigators obtained a search warrant for Alfred's home. Upon searching his house, they discovered numerous newspaper articles detailing sex crimes against women and girls. The police also found that several women had accused him of harassment, and even his own wife had suspicions about his involvement in Candy's murder. However, despite the suspicious circumstances, the police were unable to find any concrete evidence that directly linked Alfred to the crime, and investigators were hesitant to clear him of suspicion. In the face of a lack of evidence, detectives shifted their focus to other suspects. Over several months, the police diligently investigated each person, but every lead turned out to be a dead end. Later, investigators found another suspect, a serial killer named Hugh Morse. He was arrested in 1961 for a string of crimes. The important evidence that Hugh was involved in Candy's case was that he had a habit of chewing grape-flavored gum, which was similar to a substance found on Candy's clothes. Furthermore, additionally, he had committed 2 murders in Spokane a few months after Candy's death, further increasing the suspicion of his involvement in the crime. Hugh began committing crimes quite early. His first arrest was for assaulting a woman, but the penalty was lenient. He was merely discharged from the army. He then went on to commit multiple robberies in Los Angeles and served only a 6-month sentence. After being released, Hugh tricked 2 8-year-old girls into going with him to a secluded area by promising them ice cream. He then sexually assaulted them. This crime led to his arrest. However, instead of going to prison, a medical commission determined that he was a sexual psychopath. As a result, he was placed in a mental health facility for a period of 2 years to receive treatment. After his release, doctors thought Hugh had fully recovered. He then moved to Spokane, where he began peeping into women's windows. His actions took a more severe turn in November 1959, when he broke into the home of a 28-year-old woman and acted violently, ultimately killing her. 10 months later, Hugh entered the residence of a 69-year-old woman, repeating the same crimes as before. A month after that, he assaulted another woman, stabbing her multiple times. Although she sustained severe injuries, she managed to survive the attack. After escaping the city, he continued a devastating crime spree over several months, brutally attacking and sexually assaulting numerous women and girls with a knife, ultimately claiming the lives of 2 more victims. To evade capture, Hugh constantly moved from city to city and state to state until the FBI intervened. He was eventually added to the list of the country's 10 most wanted fugitives, which ultimately led to his capture. Hugh received multiple life sentences, but his troubles didn't end there. He attempted to end his life in his cell. Fortunately, the guards intervened in time and saved him, allowing him to continue serving his sentence. Detectives in Candy's case visited Hugh in prison multiple times, trying to gather information about the case. Despite repeatedly denying any involvement, he took a polygraph test to prove his innocence. The test results suggested he was telling the truth, but these results are considered unreliable and therefore cannot be used as evidence in court. At the time of the murder, Hugh lived in Spokane, and furthermore, he had a criminal record of similar incidents that made investigators suspicious. They initially considered him the primary suspect due to he familiar with this neighborhood. But he consistently denied any involvement. Although they suspected him, they did not have enough evidence to conclude his involvement in the crime. The police then shifted their attention to another suspect, 49-year-old Howard Barnett. He was arrested in February 1960 for allegedly molesting a minor girl. Shortly after his arrest, he ended his life right in his cell at the Spokane police station. Hugh wrote a cryptic message in his own blood on the wall before his death, stating, "He have a sin before the Lord." However, it wasn't until after he passed away that his wife became aware of his arrest. She then asked the police if they thought Hugh might have been involved in Candy's death. Despite several investigations, no concrete evidence was found to connect he to the crime. The police continued to pursue new leads over the years, looking into other possible suspects. A woman came forward with information, stating that on the day of Candy's disappearance, she saw a green car following her. Police reopened the case multiple times but were unable to gather evidence linking the green car or any other. The case was reopened periodically over the years but always hit a dead end. The investigation into Candy's murder was complicated by numerous false confessions. 13 individuals came forward claiming to be the killer, but when questioned by the police, they couldn't provide any details that only the real killer would know. Instead, they simply repeated details they had read in the newspapers. The police department changed personnel a lot during the investigation. However, none were able to solve the case, allowing Candy's murder to remain one of the state's most notorious and baffling crimes. The crime had a profound impact on the local community, leading many parents to reevaluate their perception of safety and ultimately changing the way they supervised their children's outdoor activities. In the early 2000s, the case was reopened, and a new detective used modern technologies to help with the investigation. Fortunately, the police had collected and preserved crucial evidence in 1959, which allowed experts to take another look. By using modern DNA analysis, they were able to identify a male semen sample on the Candy's clothing. Further analysis of the DNA sample was done to create a profile, which was then entered into the FBI database, but yielded no matches. Investigators also compared the DNA to samples from multiple suspects, but none of them matched. For many years, people suspected Hugh Morse of committing the crime, but forensic evidence revealed no link between him and the murder. As a result, the investigation stalled once again. Although the police had a DNA sample from the perpetrator who sexually assaulted and killed Candy, identifying the individual continued to elude them. In 2021, authorities reopened the case, and a new detective chose to use genetic genealogy, a cutting-edge DNA analysis method, had already solved numerous cold cases. By applying this innovative approach, the detective hoped that the case will be solved. The detective reached out to several labs that specialized in the analysis he needed, but they all shared the same frustrating news. They concluded the sample had deteriorated too much, making it impossible to extract the necessary information. Undeterred, the detective contacted one final lab, and it has provided new clues that are helpful to the investigation. Armed with state-of-the-art tools, the experts were able to analyze the sample successfully and generate a DNA profile of the perpetrator. This profile was then uploaded to genealogical databases, allowing investigators to begin searching for the DNA owner's relatives. After carefully examining thousands of individuals, then they narrowed down their focus to one specific family. Upon investigating this family, the investigators discovered that the DNA sample likely came from one of three brothers, but all three brothers had passed away. However, one of the brothers had a living daughter. The police reached out to her about the possibility that her father might have been involved in the murder. Despite her initial shock, she agreed to cooperate with the investigation. The woman provided a DNA sample, which was compared to the semen found on Candy's clothing. The results confirmed that she was closely related to culprit, who left the DNA evidence on Candy's clothing. Based on this new information, the police obtained a court order to exhume the woman's father's grave. DNA experts extracted a DNA profile from his remains and compared it to the semen found on Candy's clothing. After a 62-year wait, the results revealed a definitive match between the DNA from the woman's father and the semen found on Candy's clothing. This confirmed that the perpetrator was a man named John Ryhoff. John Ryhoff was not initially identified as a suspect following Candy's murder. However, detectives later investigated his biography and found links to other crimes. At the time of the murder, John was 20 years old and lived within a mile of Candy's house. He was also stationed at an army base near where her body was discovered. 2 years after the murder, John committed another crime when he attacked a woman, binding and sexually assaulting her, then attempting to kill her. The woman managed to survive the attack. As a result of the assault, John was arrested and sentenced to 6 months in prison. He also received a dishonorable discharge from the army. Upon his release from prison, John started a family and has 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. He kept a low profile and appeared to be living an ordinary life, working multiple jobs. One of these jobs was at a food packaging plant, where he suffered a severe chemical burn to his face and leaving a scar. John finally ended his life in June 1970, at the age of 31, leaving no note or explanation. The authorities determined that the victim, Candy, may have known her killer, John. Candy's friend, who was 10 years old at the time of the murder, was revealed to be the killer's sister. Years later, she recalled how she cried in her brother's, John's arms after learning about Candy's death. Unaware that he was the person responsible. Sadly, Candy's parents did not live to see their daughter's case solved. Candy's mother passed away in 2006, and her father died life in 1963. For years after Candy's murder, likely due to his inability to cope with his loss. After 62 years, the case was finally solved, marking one of the longest investigations in history. The investigation involved multiple detectives from different generations. At the press conference announcing the killer's identity, only one officer who worked on the case in 1959 was present. He expressed gratitude for having lived long enough to see the case resolved and to finally know the truth. The daughter of the killer, John Rye Hoff, initially struggled to accept that her father committed such a heinous crime. However, she eventually came to terms with the fact, describing her father as a monster who took an innocent girl's life. She has expressed regret that her father was not held accountable for his actions during his lifetime. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Gabby Doolin. Gabby Doolin was born on December 26, 2007, in Scottsville, Kentucky, a small town with a population of just over 4,000. In Scottsville, most people know each other or know someone in every family. Like many small towns, here there are very few types of entertainment. Locals primarily focused on school sports, especially football. The local school had good fields for football, baseball, and tennis, where they frequently held games and competitions. Participating in these activities has become a tradition for locals, especially when their children participate. Gabby's family was typical. Her parents had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. The oldest son was a member of the school football team, while Gabby participated in cheerleading. In November 2015, when Gabby was 7 years old, their town was preparing for the biggest football game of the year. Their school team was about to compete against a team from another county. And everyone was excited for this contest. Although Gabby's older brother played on the team, but she liked playing with other children more than playing games. Gabby's parents originally intended to leave her at home with their youngest son, cared for by a relative. However, Gabby convinced them to let her join them. On the evening of November 14th, they went to the school field for a game. In addition to local people, many people from a neighboring county came to support their team. Once they arrived at the stadium, Gabby saw her friends and asked her mom if she could play with them. Her mom agreed but reminded her to stay on school grounds and stick with the other kids. After that, her mom went to the bleachers, while she ran off to meet her friends. Gabby ran back and forth to her mom a few times. After that, she ran away to play again. At one point, she visited her dad, who was in the announcement room, and asked him for some money to buy snacks at the concession stand, then she running off again. Minutes later, Gabby's friends approached her mom in the bleachers, looking worried. Her mom noticed Gabby was not with them and asked what was wrong. The girls explained they had decided to play hide and seek, and Gabby was to find them. They had hidden in the restroom, but time passed, and Gabby never found them. Thinking they had won, the girls left their hiding spot to find Gabby, but she was nowhere to be seen. They called her name and checked all the places they had been playing earlier, but Gabby had seemingly disappeared. They then remembered that Gabby might have gone to the bleachers to find her mom, so they rushed there. Gabby's mother panicked when she discovered her daughter was missing and quickly informed her husband. He hurried off to search the area around the stadium. Meanwhile, the mother headed to the concession stand, where Gabby had wanted to buy snacks, to continue her search. While searching, the parents Gabby's encountered friends and shared the news about their daughter's disappearance. Concerned, their friends joined in the search for Gabby. They thoroughly searched the area around the stadium but found no trace of Gabby. Returning to the stadium, the parents Gabby's made an announcement over the loudspeakers in hopes that she would hear it, but there was still no sign of her. As the game paused and spectators returned to their seats, they continued to ask people if they had seen Gabby, and some offered to help search as well. They went out again to search the area around the stadium and asked the staff to turn on flashlights around the baseball field, which led to a small forest. They walked through the forest but still couldn't find Gabby. By this time, about 20 minutes had passed since she disappeared, and the parents decided to call the police. Officers quickly arrived at the scene, listened to the accounts from the parents and Gabby's friends, and they began their search. The local police department had little experience with serious cases like this, as child disappearances were rare in their small town. The officers immediately considered the worst-case scenario, that Gabby may have been abducted or harmed. The officers encountered a pressing issue: the suspected kidnapper was likely at the stadium, where a game was about to conclude. Realizing they had limited time before fans started leaving, which may include suspects, they decided to stop the game and lock down the stadium, keeping everyone inside. Police kept watch at all exits to stop anyone from fleeing. They decided not to inform people about the situation, to avoid causing panic, so as not to hinder their search. If people became aware that a kidnapper of a 7-year-old girl might be nearby, it could lead to chaos. Meanwhile, state police arrived at the school and began searching the surrounding area. They moved toward the baseball field and entered the woods. Deeper into the trees, they discovered a small creek where they found the body of a girl, later identified as Gabby. They called for an ambulance to transport her body to the medical examiner. A preliminary examination indicated asphyxiation due to visible marks on her neck. Furthermore, part of Gabby's clothes were also missing, making the police suspect that she had been sexually assaulted. Gabby's mother saw an ambulance near the woods and immediately thought that her daughter had been found in need of medical attention. She rushed to the scene, but was stopped by the police, who didn't want her to witness the disturbing scene they were dealing with. The police investigation had quickly turned into a murder case, so they decided to relocate everyone from the stadium to the school gym. The investigators suspected that the killer might be among the group, and they needed to identify the perpetrator as soon as possible. The investigators then informed Gabby's parents about the likely circumstances of her death. They inquired if the parents had any suspicions about the person responsible for this heinous act. Specifically, they inquired if anyone had made threats against the family or if the parents had noticed anything unusual. However, Gabby's parents stated they had no idea who could be behind this act. Then, detectives interviewing Gabby's friends to see if they had noticed anything unusual that evening. They asked if anyone had been following or watching them, but the girls didn't remember anything suspicious. Detectives also brought Gabby's friends to the gym and asked them to carefully observe the people present, hoping to trigger their memory. Unfortunately, this effort did not yield any significant leads. The lead detective persisted in his belief that Gabby's friends may have unknowingly seen the kidnapper. He suspected that they might have been hesitant to point him out due to fear. To aid their recall, he encouraged them to remember every detail from that evening. Eventually, one of Gabby's friends mentioned that when she hid from Gabby in the restroom, she saw a man near the door. Although the girl's memory of the man's appearance was limited, she recalled that he was wearing a denim jacket. The police spoke to the ticket vendor, who confirmed seeing a man with a denim jacket draped. The vendor found this person's behavior unusual and suspected he was intoxicated. Although this new information helped, the police still couldn't identify the man. The police started questioning the people who had been at the game. As they did, it became clear why they were all being held there. They grew concerned, particularly for the safety of their children. Despite their fear, they cooperated with the police and answered their questions. To further investigate, the police cross-referenced the names of men present in the gym against a sex offenders registry, but found no matches. They also checked on sex offenders who had lived near the school, verifying their whereabouts at the time of the incident, but all of them had alibis. None of them had been near the school at the time of the incident. Several witnesses reported that they saw a man named Timothy Madden, he acting strangely near the women's restroom during the game. As a local resident, many people were familiar with him, but they stated that his behavior that evening seemed suspicious. According to these witnesses, Madden was wearing a denim jacket, which matches the description provided by one of Gabby's friends who also saw a man near the restroom. A witness who was a distant relative of Timothy reported that during the game, Timothy seemed distracted. Despite his younger son playing on the field, Timothy, who normally showed great interest in his son's sports activities, wasn't paying attention. Several other witnesses also expressed concerns about Timothy's unusual behavior, leading investigators to interrogate him. As night fell, many people had been released from the school. Before speaking with Timothy, investigators sought the local sheriff's opinion. The sheriff, who had known Timothy, doubted he was capable of committing such a crime. Timothy lived with his wife and 5 children. When police went to speak with him, they knocked on his door, and he answered. The officers asked if he knew the reason for their visit, and Timothy stated he was aware of Gabby's murder, but had no involvement in it. The detectives then used a tactic to gather more information. They asked Timothy if he could explain why several eyewitnesses claimed to have recorded him talking to Gabby shortly before her murder, through videos they supposedly provided. However, the detectives had fabricated this information. Their intention was to provoke Timothy into revealing his guilt or new information if he was involved in the crime. Timothy initially claimed he had no knowledge of the events, but he quickly changed his story. He admitted to speaking to Gabby near the stadium that evening. According to Timothy, he had stepped outside to smoke when several girls ran by him. Shortly after, Gabby approached and asked if he had seen her friends, explaining they were playing hide-and-seek and she couldn't find them. Timothy directed her towards their location, and she ran off. The detectives found Timothy's rapid change in story suspicious. Furthermore, his account indicated that he had spoken to Gabby just minutes before her disappearance. Notably, at the time when they met near the stadium, there were no witnesses present, which could have provided Timothy with an opportunity to commit the crime. The detectives then inquired if Timothy could provide a reasonable explanation if his DNA was found on Gabby's body. He replied calmly that he had none. They also requested a DNA sample from Timothy and the clothing he wore at the stadium. Timothy agreed to both requests. However, when handing over his clothing to the police, they discovered suspicious stains on the pants, denim jacket, and underwear that resembled blood. When questioned about the stains, Timothy insisted they were just dirt and denied any wrongdoing. However, the police were skeptical and decided to wait for the DNA analysis results to proceed with an arrest. After several days, the forensic pathologist completed the examination of the victim's body, confirming that Gabby's cause of death was manual strangulation. The pathologist also determined that she had been brutally assaulted. A biological sample of the perpetrator was extracted and sent to the laboratory for further analysis. The day after the murder, something unexpected happened. An anonymous letter arrived at the police station, claiming a suspicious person had been seen at the game. The letter provided a detailed description of the person's car, including the make and license plate number. This allowed investigators to quickly track down the vehicle's owner, who was a student living about 30 minutes from Scottsville. When questioned by the police, the student denied attending the game and knowing about the murder. He claimed to have been at work that evening, and the police were able to verify his alibi. As a result, he was removed from the list of suspects. Despite this, the person who wrote the anonymous letter was never identified. It is unclear whether the letter was intended as a trap or a cruel joke, but it is clear that the student was innocent. Police quickly received additional clues. Several people reported suspicious behavior by a 16-year-old local boy. He had given conflicting accounts of his whereabouts on the day of the game, claiming both to have been there and not to have attended. He also mentioned seeing girls playing hide and seek. The detectives discovered that the boy was Timothy Madden's son. However, what they found even more alarming was that the boy had threatened his father with a knife just 2 weeks before the murder. The police wanted to question the boy further but needed his parents to be present. However, his mother refused to cooperate and wouldn't provide a DNA sample, leaving the police without any concrete evidence. As news of the police investigation into the Timothy family spread, rumors began circulating in the small town of Scottsville. Some speculated that one of Timothy's older sons could be a suspect, while others suspected Timothy himself. Gabby's parents were shocked to hear these rumors, especially since they had known Timothy Madden since childhood and were close to his family. Their children played on the same sports teams, and they would often sit together at games. Given their long-standing friendship, Gabby's parents found it difficult to imagine that anyone from their social circle could be connected to the murder. Following the spread of rumors in town, another incident occurred. The 20-year-old eldest son of the Timothy family began sending text messages to the police. He using profanity and issuing threats, insisting police stop bothering his family. He then was promptly arrested for making these threats. Further investigation revealed that there was an outstanding arrest warrant for him in another town, related to allegations of assaulting a minor. During questioning, the young man attributed his behavior to frustration over the accusations against his family. He denied any involvement in the murder, claiming he was at his cousin's house in a neighboring town on the evening in question. He consented to providing a DNA sample, which was then sent to the lab for analysis. On November 20th, 6 days after Gabby's murder, her funeral was held, drawing hundreds of mourners from Scottsville and surrounding towns. Everyone came together to support Gabby's parents, donating to help cover the funeral expenses. Meanwhile, the lab finished analyzing the DNA evidence, comparing it to samples from Timothy and his son. The results were conclusive. The semen on Gabby's body matched Timothy Madden's DNA, and the blood on his clothes matched Gabby's DNA. Detectives attended the funeral and discreetly informed Gabby's parents about this. At the same time, police officers arrived at Timothy's house and took him into custody. However, Timothy still maintains that he is innocent. He said the blood on his clothes was his own, the result of a scratch from a fence. This contradicted his initial testimony to police, in which he had claimed the stain was mud. With the DNA evidence in hand, the prosecution took the case to court, seeking the death penalty. During trial preparation, Timothy's lawyer maintained his client's innocence. He raised concerns about the reliability of the evidence, citing inconsistencies in the timeline. Specifically, the lawyer argued that Timothy was at the stadium filming a game at the time of the murder. However, Timothy himself had previously told police that he saw Gabby around the same time. The lawyer highlighted that Gabby's body was discovered in a creek, yet when Timothy returned to the stadium, his clothes were dry. Additionally, Timothy's mother, who resided with him, reported that when Timothy came home, he was wearing clean clothes, didn't look troubled, and behaved as usual. However, the prosecution argued that the discovery of Timothy's semen on Gabby's body made all of the defense's arguments meaningless. This evidence firmly established that Timothy was involved in the case. According to police, his account of that evening contained some truth. It is possible that Timothy did leave the stadium during the game and encountered Gabby, who was searching for her friends. Given that Timothy was the father of one of Gabby's friends, she would have been familiar with him. Gabby may have approached Timothy to ask about the whereabouts of the other girls. At this point, Timothy might have concocted a plan, telling Gabby that the girls had gone into the woods behind the baseball field and offered to take her there. Once they were far enough from the school, he could have assaulted and killed her, then go back to the match. The wait for Timothy's trial had been ongoing for 4 years, causing distress for Gabby's family. They were anxious for justice to be served and for the person responsible for the murder to be held accountable. However, the case was slowed down due to many administrative procedures, leaving the family frustrated and having to wait for many years. In 2019, the prosecution and defense started negotiating a plea deal. The prosecution proposed waiving the death penalty if Timothy pleaded guilty and accepted a life sentence. Gabby's parents supported this proposal, as the prolonged wait for the trial was taking a toll on them. They also wanted to avoid the emotional pain of attending multiple hearings. Although Timothy had consistently maintained his innocence, he eventually agreed to the plea deal and confessed. However, the terms of the agreement did not require him to disclose the details of his actions, he only had to admit his guilt. This was unsatisfactory for Gabby's family, as they wanted the perpetrator to take full responsibility for his crimes and provide a complete account of what happened to their daughter. The court hearing became heated, Gabby's father yelling at Timothy and Timothy's relatives shouting at Gabby's family. The judge was forced to intervene, calling a break and separating the parties. Ultimately, Timothy was sentenced to life in a maximum security prison. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Alex Murdaugh. Richard Alexander, Alex Murdaugh, born May 27, 1968, is a member of a prominent and well-connected South Carolina legal family. The Murdaugh family has dominated the region's legal system for more than 100 years, with 3 consecutive generations serving as district attorneys of the 14th Judicial District from 1920 to 2006. However, that dynasty has come to an abrupt end for Alex. The Murdaugh family has been building the foundation for their success for decades. Specifically, when Alex's great-grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh Sr., founded the law firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Elaf, and Dietrich, PMPD, they became an influential family in the area. Their strong presence led to the Hampton area being referred to as Murdaugh County. Alex sought to follow in his family's footsteps and pursued a law degree at the University of North Carolina. While in college, he met and married High's wife, Margaret Maggie Brandstetter, in 1993. They began seeing each other in 1991 and were married on August 14, 1993, at the Second Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. Alex, a personal injury attorney who works at the family firm PMPD, seeks to continue the family legacy. Unlike previous generations of Murdaughs, however, Alex abused the power and influence of the family business to cover up financial crimes, theft, and even suspected murder. His nefarious dealings lasted for more than a decade until his youngest son, Paul, died in a boating accident. Paul's boating accident was the latest in a string of suspicious deaths linked to the Murdaugh family. Many believe that these deaths were not actual accidents but part of a larger cover-up. Given the history and resources of the Murdaugh family, this theory seems plausible, especially considering how they handled Mallory Beach's death. Paul Murdaugh sailed his family boat to a party on Pucas Island on February 23, 2019. Having just graduated from high school, Paul and his girlfriend Morgan Dowdy, along with Anthony Cook and Mallory Beach, wanted to have a party and a night of unsupervised fun. They planned to start the night with a house party and oyster roast on the island. However, parties can't start without alcohol, so Paul bought some beer and hard liquor using his brother's ID. They left the Murdaugh River house at 7 p.m. By midnight, they were ready to continue their fun, so Paul decided to steer the boat to downtown Beaufort. There, he and Connor, a teenager, also joined the boat party, had 2 rounds of drinks around 1 a.m. On the way back to the boat, Paul and Connor were caught on a surveillance camera. At this point, Paul had been drinking heavily, and according to other passengers, he began to act strangely around 1:15 a.m. As they sailed, the situation became more complicated. The group started to disagree with Paul as he steered the boat in a disoriented manner and acted as if he were drunk. Mall. Ori recalled that Anthony asked Paul to take him to a nearby rock to get off, but Paul refused. Morgan later commented that Paul took his hands off the wheel several times to argue with her, which made Mallory very nervous. GPS data from the boat's Garmin device indicated a period of acceleration. Paul, however, denied pushing the boat forward, but he was at the wheel at 2:20 a.m. when the boat hit the bridge, throwing Mallory into the water. The other teens were also in danger. Connor suffered a broken jaw and Morgan sustained a serious hand injury. Connor called 911 and help arrived immediately. When Deputy Beaufort arrived, the teens were in a state of chaos. The first thing he noticed was that Anthony was in distress. He reported that when he saw Paul smiling, Anthony actually tried to run past him to get to Paul. Police reported finding blood in the main cabin of the boat and a large crack in the hull from the collision. All of the teens were intoxicated and were taken to the hospital for treatment, except for Anthony. Everyone agreed to treatment except Paul, who was highly agitated and had a blood alcohol level of 0.243, while above the legal limit. Paul's father, Alex, was present that night, going from room to room trying to calm everyone down and control the situation. After 8 days of searching, Mallory's body was finally found. The autopsy revealed that she died from blunt force trauma to the head and subsequent drowning. Several witnesses, including Paul's girlfriend Morgan, testified that Paul was speeding in the boat that night. However, Paul was neither arrested nor charged. This led to speculation that Alex may have intervened in the legal process to help his son escape punishment. In March 2019, the Murdaugh family was sued for wrongful death. Mallory's family alleged that Paul's mother, Maggie, knew her son was intoxicated while the group was boating. Additionally, they claimed that his brother Buster provided the paperwork necessary for the group to purchase alcohol. It was not until April 18, 2019, on Mallory's 20th birthday, that Paul was charged with 3 felony counts of operating a boat while intoxicated, resulting in her death and the serious injury of 2 other passengers. Paul pleaded not guilty and was released on $50,000 bail. Unfortunately, Paul's trial date never arrived. He died before the case could proceed. Another death that appears to be linked to the Murdaugh family is that of Stephen Smith, an openly gay teenager whose body was found on July 8, 2015, lying in the middle of a road in Hampton County, South Carolina. The cause of death for the victim was severe head trauma. The incident was initially ruled a hit-and-run accident, and no suspects were arrested. However, the victim's mother believes her son was murdered in a hate crime. Stephen had been classmates with Buster Murdaugh in high school. In addition to their friendship, there were rumors that the two had been romantically involved. Some have suggested Buster was involved in Stephen's death and that the story of him running away after the accident was a lie. On March 22, 2023, the South Carolina Department of Law Enforcement reopened the case, confirming that his death was indeed a homicide, although no suspects have been named. Another case involves the Murdaugh family. Gloria was the longtime housekeeper for Alex's family. On February 2, 2018, she suffered a serious head injury after falling down the stairs at the Moselle mansion. She later died on February 26, 2018, from complications related to the accident. Alex claimed that his dogs greeted Gloria at the top of the stairs, causing her to trip and fall backward, leading to the accident. It is unclear why no autopsy was performed to confirm Alex's version of events. Gloria's death certificate listed the cause of death as natural causes. Gloria's sons sued for their mother's untimely death in 2018 and were awarded a $1.4 million insurance settlement in 2020. However, the money never reached them. Alex allegedly plotted to collect the insurance money, approached Gloria's sons, and encouraged them to sue him, even introducing them to an attorney named Corey Fleming. Corey Fleming was a longtime friend and associate of one of Alex's sons. They conspired to defraud and steal the Gloria family's insurance money. They wired the insurance money into Alex's bank account without notifying the Gloria family that they had received the money. Gloria's sons then filed a new civil lawsuit on September 15, 2021, against Alex. On the same day, state investigators opened a criminal investigation into Gloria's death. Investigators are trying to determine whether there is any criminal liability in her death. Based on a request from the Hampton County coroner, they found that Gloria's cause of death was not due to natural causes. After Gloria's family gave permission, authorities conducted an autopsy to investigate further. In late September 2021, Alex faced multiple charges related to financial misconduct and embezzlement. Before the Gloria family sued, Alex had been involved in fraud and embezzlement for nearly a decade. Alex was accused of participating in a money laundering and painkiller abuse scheme that lasted from October 2013 to September 2021, along with his distant cousin and co-defendant, Curtis Smith. On September 4, 2021, Alex and Curtis conspired to commit murder. Alex provided Curtis with a gun and instructed him to shoot Alex himself, intending for Buster, Alex's only surviving son, to collect Alex's life insurance policy after his death. Curtis went to the location Alex had prepared, where Alex pretended that his tire was flat, and Curtis shot him as instructed. However, the bullet only caused minor injuries to Alex, who called 911 himself. When local law enforcement inspected the scene, they recognized signs of foul play but were unable to prove it. A few days later, Alex admitted that he had conspired with Curtis and staged the shooting. His lawyer informed him that he was mentally unstable and that malicious elements were taking advantage of the situation. They claimed that Alex wanted to commit suicide so that Buster could collect a $10 million life insurance policy. Alex turned himself in when he learned a warrant had been issued for his arrest and was charged with fraud and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. He filed a police report just 2 days after the incident. Alex announced that he would resign from his family law firm and enter rehab for treatment. After his release, he was quoted as saying that he had made many decisions that he regretted. In September 2021, the South Carolina Supreme Court indefinitely suspended Alex's law license. Further investigation into Alex's life revealed that he had committed several financial crimes, including tax evasion, embezzlement, and misappropriation of funds from clients and the law firm where he worked. Alex was released from rehab on October 14, 2021, and was later arrested. He was charged with 2 felony counts of fraud. The arrest was based on an investigation into the misappropriation of investment funds related to the unnatural death of Gloria. This time, Alex was denied bail. This was just the beginning of Alex's legal troubles. On November 18, 2021, he was indicted on 27 counts of financial fraud, including allegedly stealing money from clients, other lawyers, and the family of his deceased housekeeper. On December 9, 2021, an additional 21 charges were filed against Alex, bringing the total to 48. The charges include 1 count of counterfeiting, 4 counts of money laundering, 7 counts of computer crime, and 9 counts of breach of trust with intent to commit fraud, among others. It is estimated that Alex stole more than $6.2 million from his victims. The investigation into Alex's business dealings has been ongoing, with new charges being filed against him. By June 2022, the total number of charges against him had reached 81. On July 13, 2022, when Alex was officially disbarred, he faced a total of 84 criminal charges and 11 lawsuits. Mallory Beach's mother, whose daughter was a 19-year-old victim, was one of several people who filed lawsuits related to the estate of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh. The prominent attorney's alleged financial misconduct has raised questions about his character and conduct. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, has decided to review what they know and have accepted as the truth about the double murder and further investigate the financial crimes against Alex. Investigators realized that this was a troubled marriage. Alex and Maggie were experiencing marital difficulties. Maggie was living separately at the family home on Edisto Island, which is a little over an hour's drive from the Moselle estate. Maggie's sister, Marion Branstetter, told police that Maggie had no plans to see her husband on the night of the murder. Alex contacted Maggie on that fateful day, asking her to come to the family hunting lodge. He wanted her to accompany him to visit his father, who was dying and could pass away at any moment. Initially, she did not want to go but texted a friend, saying that her husband's behavior was suspicious and that he might be planning something. She suggested they meet at the hospital instead of following her husband. Eventually, she agreed to drive to the Moselle estate before going to the hospital to visit her ailing father-in-law. However, she was murdered before she had a chance to see him. Maggie and her youngest son were murdered at the Murdaugh family's 1,700-acre farm in Moselle, which included a house, a doghouse, a cabin, and wetlands. Maggie and Paul were shot multiple times near the doghouse. Paul was shot twice with a shotgun, while Maggie was shot 5 times with a different weapon, which ballistics analysis showed was a .300 caliber round from an AR-style rifle. Alex stated that he had taken a long nap that day before visiting his dad, who suffered from dementia. He claimed he was gone for about 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and when he returned, he found his wife and youngest son dead on the floor near the doghouse. Law enforcement reviewed Alex's schedule that night, and he admitted that he had taken a nap on the couch before leaving for his dad. In this case, police investigated the motive behind prominent attorney Alex's murder of his family. Investigators found a key clue. Weeks before the killings, a grand jury subpoenaed Alex's finances for an probe related to his son Paul's 2019 fatal boating accident. This may have been the primary motive. Alex is worried that all his financial wrongdoing will be exposed following a hearing scheduled for June 10, 2021. Furthermore, his law firm has uncovered his misuse of company funds. Gene Singer, the company's chief financial officer at the time, confronted Alex about the missing money on June 7, 2021, the day of the murder. State authorities say the financial pressure used Alex to panic and fear that his world was falling apart. Once a prominent lawyer in South Carolina, Alex devised a bold plan to hide his financial crimes. However, these acts are gradually becoming public and drawing sympathy away from him. On July 14, 2022, 13 months after the shooting that killed his wife and son, Alex was charged with their murders. His trial commenced with charges of murder and possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. The prosecution claimed that Alex used both a handgun and an AR rifle to shoot and kill his wife and son at close range. The murder weapons were never found. Alex's defense team argued that the shootings were carried out by 2 different shooters based on the weapons used. An expert witness for the defense stated that the height of the shooters could have ranged between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 4 inches, while Alex stands at 6 feet 4 inches tall, which disqualified him as a suspect. Prosecutors pointed to the gunshot evidence as indicating Alex's involvement. However, the expert witness, when questioned, acknowledged that other factors besides height could have influenced the trajectory of the bullets. The ballistics investigation determined that Maggie was shot with .300 blackout rounds from an AR-style rifle. Investigators found a box of these bullets on the Murdaugh family property. The state's attorney argued that Alex killed his wife and son to gain sympathy and avoid responsibility for his financial crimes. However, Alex's attorney disputed this theory, claiming that there was no reason for Alex to divert the financial investigation away from himself and instead put himself at the center of a murder investigation. During the trial, evidence emerged suggesting that Alex was not the one who directly committed the murders that the South Carolina Department of Law Enforcement, SLED, was investigating. Alex's attorney, Dick Harputlian, argued that he had an alibi for the night of the murders and had an motive to kill Maggie and their youngest son, Paul. He portrayed Alex and Maggie's marriage as one of everlasting love. However, prosecutors presented 2 videos of Alex from the night of the murders, taken hours apart. One was from Paul's Snapchat, and the other was from a law enforcement officer's body camera at the scene of the crime. The Snapchat footage was taken about an hour before the murders. When compared to what Alex was wearing after the incident, there was a clear discrepancy in clothing. In the Snapchat video, Alex was dressed in a blue shirt, which was different from the one he wore that was captured on the police body camera. Investigators concluded that they did not find the blue shirt they were looking for. Prosecutors believe Alex attempted to influence a key witness's testimony by asking if she remembered the shirt he was wearing the night of the incident. Alex's cell phone records showed that he was only at his mother's house for about 15 to 20 minutes. Alex's MOT. Hers caretaker also confirmed this, claiming that he only stayed for about 15 to 20 minutes before leaving. However, Alex claimed that he stayed for at least 45 minutes, and possibly as long as an hour and a half. When asked how long he stayed with his mother, Alex responded, about 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes at most. The most important piece of evidence was found on Paul's phone, which was recovered at the scene. It included a video that Paul had recorded at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before investigators believe the murder occurred. The video was recorded in a dog kennel and featured the audio of 3 separate voices. Family and friends identified the voices as those of Paul, Maggie, and Alex. This placed Alex in the vicinity of the murders, although he claimed he was never in the doghouse that night. During the 5th week of the trial, Alex took the stand and insisted that he never intended to harm his wife and son. He admitted that he had lied about his alibi, claiming that his was because he was addicted to opiates and prone to paranoia at the time. Prosecutors argued that after Alex killed his wife and son, he used his wife's phone to make several calls and send text messages to construct his alibi. Cell phone records also showed that Alex and his wife's phones locked within seconds of each other, which was presented to the jury as additional evidence. Based on data from Alex's cell phone, prosecutors noted that he engaged in a number of unusual activities during the timeframe of the murders. They claimed he attempted to conceal or destroy evidence that could link him to the case. However, Alex's attorneys countered this claim by pointing out that Alex's phone activity did not align with his wife's actions, arguing that it was impossible to conclude that he took his wife's phone after the shooting. Ultimately, the video recorded at the dog kennel provided decisive evidence that influenced the case outcome. The jury returned its verdict after 3 hours of deliberation on March 2, 2023. They found Alex guilty on all counts and sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. In addition, the jury also convicted him of 2 counts of using a weapon in a violent crime, which resulted in an additional 5 years in prison. Alex pleaded guilty to 22 counts of financial crimes as part of a deal but maintained his innocence regarding the murders of his wife and son. On March 9, 2023, he filed an appeal of his double murder conviction. During the trial, Alex's attorney filed a motion for a new trial after discovering evidence of jury tampering by Rebecca Hill, a Culleton County court clerk. Rebecca allegedly advised the jury not to believe Alex's testimony and the other evidence presented by the defense. She also allegedly pressured the jury to quickly return a guilty verdict and misrepresented key information to the judge. A hearing will be held for Alex's attorneys to present evidence and witnesses to support her claims. However, no judge has yet been selected to preside over the hearing. With Alex's appeal, more than 100 drug and financial crime charges, and multiple lawsuits pending, we can expect that more new information about Alex will be revealed in the future. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Michael Haight. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980, in Seattle, Washington. As a child, his family moved to Cedar City, Utah. As a child, Michael enjoyed regular kid activities like baseball, basketball, and soccer. He was also an Eagle Scout and did well in school. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael spent a summer working at a fish plant in Alaska. He quickly rose to the position of line manager, supervising over a dozen people. His work ethic and dedication were recognized, leading to his promotion. A hardworking member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Michael went on a mission trip to southern Brazil. This experience strengthened his faith and commitment to his community. After returning to the United States, Michael attended Southern Utah University, graduating with a business degree in 2004. While at the university, Michael met his future wife, Tasha Earle. They fell in love and were married at St. George's Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael seemed to be the epitome of a hardworking husband and father. He coached his children's sports teams, attended school concerts, and spent time with them skiing and doing projects in the garage. However, on January 4, 2023, a shocking discovery exposed the dark reality of Michael's family life. That day, police found 8 bodies in Michael's home, leaving police and neighbors stunned and baffled. The alarm was raised when Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael did not show up for work, prompting worried co-workers to call the police and request a welfare check at the family's home. Officers went to Michael's Enoch home, but no one answered when they knocked. Upon further inspection, the home appeared to be empty. Since Michael's family had 5 children, officers contacted the Iron County School District to check if any children were at school. They discovered that no children were there. When officers arrived at Michael's home, the Michaels lived in a 1-story home with a basement. Detectives arrived shortly after the home was designated a crime scene. Upon entering the master bedroom, they found 4-year-old Gavin lying face down, his head turned to the left. One of his arms was propped up under his head on a pillow, and a blanket partially covered his body. Tasha was similarly covered, with only part of her body under the blanket. On the other side of the bed, police found an older woman, later identified as Gail Earle, Tasha's mother. Gail was lying on her back with her head on a pillow, and was also partially covered with a blanket, as were her daughter and grandson. When police searched Michael's home, they came across Bryn's room. Inside, they found the 12-year-old girl lying on the bed, slightly elevated and partially covered with a blanket. When they entered Amon's room, police found a 7-year-old boy lying face down in the corner. Notably, unlike his siblings, he had no pillow or blanket. Sienna, Amon's twin sister, was found in her bedroom, lying on her left side on the bed with her head on a pillow, covered with a blanket. Michael's oldest child, Macy, 17, was also found on the bed, her head on a pillow and her body covered with a blanket. Police later located Michael in the basement gym, where he was lying on a sleeping bag. Each of the 8 victims suffered fatal gunshot wounds. It didn't take long for police to identify Michael Haight as the prime suspect. They believe he killed his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children before taking his own life. As the investigation began, a neighbor shared important information that helped police create a timeline of events. The neighbor reported that she woke up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom and heard a loud bang that sounded like fireworks. However, she knew that the day fireworks were allowed in the neighborhood had passed, which made her feel uneasy. The neighbor went on to say that after the first bang, she heard 2 more bangs in quick succession. This noise was followed by a short pause, then several more bangs. Police suspect that the loud noises the neighbor heard around 3:30 a.m. were related to the brutal murder that occurred that night, which they believe was committed by Michael. During the investigation, police learned that a non-family member had reported the abuse to the Department of Child Services in 2020. The person spoke with Macy, then 14, and she shared her fears about her father, leading to a further investigation into the Michael family. After receiving the report, child welfare and child protection agencies interviewed Macy and her parents separately. During Macy's interview, she shared alarming details. She mentioned instances where her father choked her, leaving her in fear for her life. Macy revealed that these violent incidents began in 2017. One incident involved her father grabbing her by the shoulders and pushing her against a piece of wooden furniture. When police spoke with Macy's father, Michael, he denied harming his daughter. He downplayed the seriousness of the incidents Macy described, calling them a misunderstanding. Michael attributed his emotional state to the death of his father and his brother's recent divorce. Michael admitted to taking his frustrations out on his eldest daughter. However, his wife, Tasha, chose not to file a criminal complaint against him. After an investigation, Child Protective Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County District Attorney's Office also decided not to prosecute because the case did not meet the criteria for prosecution. Additionally, a fatality assessment was conducted with Tasha, and according to her response, it did not indicate that her relationship with Michael was fatal. However, victim support services were provided to Tasha and the children in the months after the case was opened. Through conversations with Tasha's friends, the police developed a different view of Michael than the one he presented to the public. When visiting Tasha, her friends would often leave the kitchen faucet on to hide their conversations because Tasha suspected Michael was eavesdropping. To avoid giving Michael a reason to yell at Tasha, her friends would also help her with housework. Whenever they texted Tasha, she would reply with short, positive messages, possibly knowing that Michael might be reading them. This behavior suggested that Tasha was trying to maintain a positive appearance in front of Michael, implying that their marriage was not in trouble. Police investigating the case discovered that Michael displayed a high level of control over his wife, Tasha. He exercised this control in a variety of ways, including confiscating her car keys and phone to restrict her freedom. Additionally, Michael's reaction when Tasha purchased a $30 rug from Walmart to replace her dirty carpet raised further suspicions about his behavior. Tasha needed to buy a rug, but her husband, Michael, was angry and said it was a waste of money. Tasha talked to her friends about how her 7-year-old son, Amon, had begun to act like his father, imitating his father's bad behavior. When Tasha asked Amon to do something, he would say, "That's not my job," which worried Tasha because it showed that Amon was not taking responsibility and was not listening to her. This is similar to how Michael often ignores or dismisses Tasha's requests, and it seems that Amon is adopting similar habits. In 2022, Tasha made the rare decision to get a manicure as an act of self-care. However, her husband, Michael, objected and tried to limit her freedom. Despite this, Tasha still felt younger and more confident after getting her nails done. She decided to make this a monthly habit, but Michael strongly objected because of cost concerns. Tasha explained that it would only cost $25 a month, but Michael was still unconvinced. He argued that spending money on her nails would take away from the needs of her children, demonstrating a controlling attitude and a strong sense of financial responsibility. At the same time, Tasha began taking better care of herself and losing weight. This came after years of her husband, Michael, calling her fat and ugly. However, instead of being supportive, Michael becomes angry when she loses weight. He accuses her of being unfaithful, trying to explain away her change in appearance. Michael's controlling behavior escalates as he tries to order Tasha to stop losing weight. He begs her to stop because he fears that other men will find her attractive. This demand stems from his own deep insecurities and his need to control his wife's body and actions. Tasha's friends report an incident involving the family's kitchen table to the police. The table is broken and Tasha needs to replace it. However, her husband, Michael, refuses to provide the necessary funds. Frustrated by the situation, Tasha decides to take matters into her own hands. She decides to refurbish the old table, hoping to improve its appearance and functionality. Michael is unhappy with this decision because Tasha did not ask for his permission. This is not the first time this has happened. During the holiday season, Michael was very frugal with the family finances. Despite earning a substantial income from his job at All 8, he only gave $100 to each child for Christmas gifts. Tasha always wanted to give her children a full Christmas, but Michael's reluctance to add money made this difficult. He believed his income was legitimate and did not feel the need to provide more for the family. Michael's intense focus on reducing waste and conserving resources leads him to impose strict household rules on Tasha. She is required to wash and reuse plastic bags, no matter how many times they have been used. This adds to Tasha's responsibilities, leaving her feeling overwhelmed. Additionally, Michael's need for control also affects Tasha's hygiene and childcare habits. Michael requires Tasha to use wipes and, claiming that it is better for the environment and will save money. However, this makes Tasha feel uncomfortable and stressed. If she does not follow Michael's instructions, he will punish her severely. He makes it clear that disobedience will lead to a lot of trouble for her. This threat creates a sense of fear and submission in Tasha, leaving her with no choice but to comply with Michael's demands. According to Tasha's friends, she shared with them that Michael's abuse was initially directed at her during their marriage. However, in the late 2010s, Michael began abusing their children as well. Macy suffered greatly as the abuse escalated. Michael put a lot of pressure on Macy to get straight A's. The burden of these unrealistic expectations became too much for Macy to bear. Macy's friends reported another disturbing incident to the police. One evening, Michael came home to find Macy sitting with her head in her mother's lap. He became angry and told Macy to get up and clean her room. This left Macy deeply disturbed, as she recalled looking into her father's eyes and seeing hatred and evil. Police also discovered an incident involving 7-year-old Briley, who was playing with a changing table and would not stop when Michael told her to stop. This led Michael to blame his wife, Tasha, for their children's behavior, calling them the worst kids in the world, disrespectful and horrible. Furthermore, Michael would insult Tasha, calling her fat and ugly, all in front of their 5 children. Tasha decided to end her 20-year marriage to Michael after his abusive behavior and uncontrollable rages. This event made her realize the harm it was causing their children, and she knew she had to leave the marriage. Although the divorce was difficult for Tasha after 2 decades together, she prioritized the safety and well-being of her children over her commitment to the marriage. On December 21, 2022, Tasha filed for divorce from her husband, Michael. However, she requested that the divorce papers be delivered after the holidays, wanting one last normal Christmas for her 5 children before separating. Tasha anticipated that Michael's behavior would worsen once the papers were delivered, and she sought to shield their children from potential repercussions during the holidays. The divorce papers were delivered to Michael at his office on December 27th. Michael contacted Tasha and conversed as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. During the call, he asked Tasha to leave their home but demanded that she leave their children behind. Tasha was adamant that she would not leave without the children. Tasha took the children to her mother's house in Lynn, Utah, despite Michael's objections. That evening, Michael went to his mother-in-law's house and asked Tasha to go out with him, but she refused. Tasha told friends that she felt uneasy being alone with Michael. After Tasha filed for divorce, her mother, Gail Earle, moved in to support Tasha and the children. However, Michael's behavior made the situation worse. Instead of leaving the house, Michael moved into the basement, which also served as a gym. He slept on a sleeping bag on the floor, used a pillow, and hung his clothes on a hanger on a couch outside the door. Tasha shared her concerns with her friends about a major problem she had discovered. She discovered that $220,000 had disappeared from the children's savings accounts. After further investigation, she discovered that Michael was responsible for secretly transferring money without telling her. Additionally, Tasha inherited several weapons from her late father, including shotguns and handguns. However, in early January 2023, she noticed that all of these weapons were missing from her home. A subsequent investigation revealed that Michael had taken these weapons, leaving Tasha and her family unprotected and vulnerable in the event of an emergency. Macy, the eldest daughter of Michael and Tasha, has told several friends that she supports her parents' divorce. She feels that the presence of her father, Michael, in the home has caused tension and she wishes for peace in the separation. Macy has even taken steps to document her father's behavior, secretly recording him with a hidden phone when he acts erratically. She has confided to a friend that she is gathering evidence to support her parents' divorce. However, her mother, Tasha, found the phone and took it away. Macy's younger sister, Briley, faced a difficult home life due to constant trouble. To escape, Briley often went to a neighbor's house, where she found comfort in playing with the neighbor's grandchildren, who were children about her age. She told a friend that she was really relieved when her parents got divorced and was even looking forward to buying some new books, but she didn't dare tell her father because she was afraid he would be angry. On January 3, 2023, Tasha met with her attorney to discuss her divorce from her abusive husband Michael. At the time, Michael was still living in the family home, but had recently moved into the basement, which provided Tasha with some relief. Her attorneys asked her if she ever felt concerned for her safety or that of her children because of Michael's erratic behavior. Despite Michael's occasional outbursts, Tasha told her attorneys that she never felt her safety or that of her children was threatened. In retrospect, it is clear that Tasha's optimism and misplaced trust in her husband were tragically misplaced. The investigation into the shooting of Michael Haight's family was a difficult and disturbing process for police as they reconstructed the events that led to the tragedy. A chilling discovery emerged from digital evidence collected from the family's computers and cell phones. On December 30th, just days before the shooting, Michael made a disturbing Google search at 10:41 p.m. He searched for information about guns and shootings, which, combined with other evidence, suggested a dark intent. Search queries included questions about how loud a 9mm gun is, how to recognize a gunshot, and what to do if you hear a gunshot in your neighborhood. In a letter Michael wrote before he took his own life, He said he would rather rot in hell than endure what he described as his wife's controlling behavior. Michael expressed that he could not endure the situation for another day and was determined to end the manipulation and control he had endured. Michael's letter expressed deep frustration and despair. He had repeatedly asked for help, but no one seemed to listen. In this letter, Michael emphasized his determination not to become a burden to society. The details of the letter he left behind shocked and disbelieving many. Michael's actions were calculated and premeditated. He had planned the murder carefully, ensuring that his wife and children would not find out until it was too late. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sierra Juffin. Sierra Juffin is a young girl who gets along with everyone. She has a cheerful, humorous, and energetic personality that brings joy to those around her. Even when she makes mistakes, she knows how to make her mother smile. As she grows up and enters high school, Sierra has maintained her adventurous spirit. She is not afraid to try new experiences, such as playing volleyball, and she is comfortable and confident both on and off the court. On July 19, 2016, Juffin's family returned home from vacation and started unpacking. Sierra was excited about her upcoming fall semester at university, especially her plans to study abroad. Her mother wanted to talk to her about it. Sierra is very active and recently bought a bike, but she hasn't had the chance to ride it yet. Whenever she finds some free time, she's eager to go biking. That day, Sierra left the house dressed casually in shorts and a tank top, with her hair in a ponytail. She told her mother she was going to visit her boyfriend Josh, who lives 712 miles away, and her mother approved of her plan. At approximately 1:05 p.m., Josh called Sierra's house. He was concerned because he couldn't reach her. Her phone went straight to voicemail. When Josh asked Sierra's mother if she was home, she replied that Sierra wasn't home. Josh then informed Sierra's mother that Sierra had left his house shortly before 7 p.m. and that he hadn't seen or heard from her since. Sierra's mother immediately sensed that something was wrong because Sierra wasn't answering her phone as she usually did. She quickly contacted Sierra's parents and grandparents, who lived nearby, but they had no idea where Sierra was. Extremely worried about their daughter's safety, Sierra's and Josh's families began an urgent search. Sierra's mother immediately got in the car and was determined to search everywhere possible. She carefully checked every corner and both sides of the road, but still could not find any trace of Sierra. Meanwhile, Sierra's aunt, along with her husband and son, also joined the search. They were worried that Sierra might have had an accident. Despite their best efforts, they still could not find any sign of her. When Sierra's mother returned home, she urgently contacted Sierra's friends via social media, hoping that someone had seen or heard news about her. However, there was no response. After many hours, there was still no sign of Sierra. Very worried, Sierra's mother decided to call the police. Just an hour later, a neighbor called to report that County Road 6 was blocked. Sierra's family rushed out of their home to see what was happening. They found a chaotic scene, with police officers refusing to let them through and providing no information. This left Sierra's mother in a panic, wondering if the police had found her missing daughter. Desperate for information, local police decided to seek the assistance of the FBI. EY promised to provide any updates to Sierra's family as soon as possible. Sierra's family couldn't sleep and lay awake, thinking about what they should do the next day. Sierra's mother and aunt refused to wait for answers and took matters into their own hands. Her mother began calling hospitals, hoping to find any sign of Sierra. After several calls with no results, they felt increasingly hopeless. However, a glimmer of hope appeared when they received a tip from Detroit, Michigan, about a young girl who bore a striking resemblance to Sierra. That woman was taken to the hospital without any identification after trying to escape from a moving car. She was severely injured, with multiple broken bones. In order to identify her, a nurse asked Sierra's family to check her body. Sierra's mother confirmed that Sierra had a scar on her calf and a pierced navel. The woman in the hospital appeared to match Sierra's description. Sierra's family hoped that the girl in the hospital was Sierra. However, they quickly discovered that it was not her, which was devastating for them, as they had pinned so much hope on finding Sierra. The next morning, police came to Sierra's home to provide an update on the events of the previous night. They reported that one of their officers had discovered a destroyed cornfield nearby. When he arrived at the area, he noticed signs of a struggle. He also saw traces of a motorcycle and decided not to disturb any evidence. During the incident, he caught a glimpse of Sierra's purple bicycle. Police later found several items at the scene, including both men's and women's sunglasses, a pair of bloody socks, and a screwdriver. Based on these findings, the police believe Sierra was abducted at this location. During the investigation, detectives extensively interviewed Sierra's friends and family to gather information about her boyfriend, Josh. Through their inquiries, they discovered that Sierra and Josh had been best friends since they were 7 years old. Their friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship during their freshman year of high school, where they were known to be a lively and fun-loving couple. One of their shared passions was skiing, which they often enjoyed together. After graduating from high school, Sierra chose to attend the University of Toledo, while Josh enrolled at Bowling Green. Despite the distance, their commitment to their relationship remained strong, and they frequently discussed the prospect of marriage. However, Sierra wanted to prioritize her studies before settling down. Their relationship remained serious, and they had weathered the challenges of a long-distance relationship. Detectives determined that Sierra arrived at Josh's home at approximately 1 p.m. on July 19th. According to the information they gathered, at around 6:30 p.m. that day, Sierra decided to leave Josh's home and wanted to ride her bike home. Concerned for her safety, Josh offered to accompany her on his motorcycle. However, on the way home, Sierra insisted that Josh turn around and let her walk home by herself, wanting to demonstrate her independence. Josh reluctantly agreed, and they parted ways, with him returning on his motorcycle and Sierra continuing her ride home. During the investigation, detectives found motorcycle tracks in the corn near Sierra's bike. This raised the question of whether these tracks could belong to Josh's bike. Detectives could not ignore this potential connection and began gathering more evidence to determine if there was any link to Josh at the scene. They quickly organized a search team to look for any clues about Sierra's missing. On July 14th, a resident reported that, while driving down the road, they picked up a motorcycle helmet lying on the side of the road. When they heard about Sierra's situation, they decided to take a closer look at the helmet and found red stains on it, possibly blood. The helmet was found in the area near where Sierra's bike was located in the cornfield. To find the owner of the helmet, the police approached Josh regarding his motorcycle helmet. Josh provided the helmet, proving that he had been wearing it when he went out. Additionally, the police confirmed that Josh had returned home after interrogating his parents. This evidence eliminated Josh from the list of suspects involved in Sierra's missing. Investigators were determined to identify the owner of the blood-stained motorcycle helmet found on the side of the road. They recognized the importance of DNA evidence, so they decided to send it to the crime lab for analysis. News of Sierra's missing quickly spread through the community. Residents formed search parties to thoroughly explore the area for any clues that could help locate her. The community also organized a candlelight vigil for Sierra at the local high school. Hundreds attended, holding flickering candles, as they came together in a display of grief, hope to her safe return. 2 days into the investigation into Sierra's missing, police received information about a truck seen speeding through the area. There was speculation that Sierra might have been kidnapped and sexually trafficked in the truck. The informant provided the police with the license plate number. Based on this clue, they interviewed the truck's owner. It was discovered that the speeding truck was not related to Sierra's abduction. The man explained that another car had suddenly pulled up from behind, possibly a family member searching for Sierra, which startled him. Consequently, he instinctively accelerated. After 48 hours of investigation, there were no leads on Sierra's whereabouts. Her family found it increasingly difficult to remain hopeful as each day passed and the chances of finding her alive diminished. Although they tried to remain optimistic, the grim reality of the situation became increasingly hard to ignore. The police conducted a door-to-door search for Sierra. Eventually, the investigation led them to a farm not far from where her bicycle was found. The property was about an acre in size and included several structures, such as a small house, a trailer, and a large barn. The owner of the property, James Worley, was met by the police at the farm and was questioned about the day Sierra went missing, hoping to gather relevant information. James surprisingly revealed that he had gone out on a motorbike that day, but the bike had broken down, causing him to lose some items, such as a screwdriver and a helmet. This revelation shocked the detectives, as those items were the same ones found at the scene of Sierra's abduction. James's unwitting involvement in the crime scene became a red flag for the detectives. Sierra's missing and her connection to James were becoming increasingly suspicious. While questioning James Worley, the detectives noticed scratches on his face, indicating that he had been involved in a fight. This further intensified the police's suspicions regarding James and raised numerous questions, such as whether the scratches were the result of a confrontation with Sierra. Detectives returned to the police station after questioning James Worley about Sierra's missing. They wanted to check his file, hoping to find relevant information. As they dug into James's past, they discovered that he had a dark criminal record, which included an attempted kidnapping of a young girl 26 years earlier, on July 4, 1989. On July 4, 1989, 26-year-old Robin Garter planned to attend a neighborhood picnic. Her mother was preparing potato salad and other food for the event. Robin thought it would be a good idea to go for a bike ride before the picnic. However, she had not brought any water with her, and it was getting very hot and uncomfortable. At that point, Robin considered going home to quench her thirst. Just as she was about to leave, she heard the sound of a car approaching. Robin figured she would wait for the car to pass and then go home. But before she could react, the car struck her bicycle. After the collision, Robin was hauled into the ditch by the side of the road. Dazed and confused, she still heard the driver stop and run out to check on her. The driver was none other than James, approached Robin anxiously, trying to assess the situation. The situation quickly became very dangerous. James suddenly struck Robin from behind, hitting her head very hard. Then, he pressed a screwdriver to her neck, threatening her life with menacing words. He ordered Robin to get into his car immediately. With the screwdriver pressed to her neck, James forced Robin into the car. After pushing her inside, he attempted to handcuff her. However, Robin resisted strongly, not allowing him to secure the second handcuff. Despite her screams for help, there was no one in the deserted field to hear her cries. Robin's persistent struggle against him caused her to nearly faint several times, but she persevered. In the unusual silence, she suddenly heard a faint sound in the distance. WH. And she looked closely. She noticed a motorbike approaching James's vehicle. Realizing that this might be her only chance to escape, Robin began waving her arms repeatedly to attract the motorcyclist's attention. Fortunately, the motorcyclist recognized her urgency and quickly stopped. In her desperate plea for help, Robin told the motorcyclist that James intended to kidnap her. Without hesitation, she climbed onto the back of the motorbike, escaping her captor and the vehicle. The man on the motorbike took Robin home, where she eventually fainted. Robin's mother called the police and an ambulance. The motorcyclist, wanting to assist the authorities, led the police back to the scene. They were surprised to find James Worley still there with his car. When questioned, James was cooperative and provided identification to confirm his identity. However, his version of the story differed significantly from what was initially believed. He completely denied any intention to kidnap Robin. According to James, Robin had been riding her bike erratically, swerving into the road, which left him unable to avoid a collision. He claimed that after the accident, Robin was in a state of panic, which was why he had handcuffed her, not with the intention of causing harm, but to tie her to the steering wheel of his truck while he sought help. He insisted that his actions were motivated solely by genuine concern for her well-being. James Worley was arrested in 1989 after attempting to kidnap Robin. He was convicted of kidnapping and subsequently incarcerated in the state prison in Mansfield, Ohio. James was sentenced to 6 to 10 years in prison but was released 3 years later for good behavior. When Robin learned that the man who had tried to kidnap her was released, she was terrified. The fear that James might strike again haunted her. Armed with information about James Worley's criminal past, the police decided to visit his residence. With a search warrant in hand, the officers went to the home of James, who was suspected of being involved in Sierra's missing. They found nothing unusual in the house. However, when they examined James's backyard, they discovered a small shed tucked away in the corner. Upon opening the shed, they found several bales of hay inside. The officers conducted a thorough search of the barn and the surrounding area, looking for evidence that could link James to Sierra's missing. All areas were searched meticulously, with the aim of uncovering any hidden items or clues. During the search, the detectives found a small green box hidden in a corner of James Worley's barn. They carefully approached and opened the box, revealing its contents. Inside, they found several carefully labeled and sealed bags containing underwear, socks, and tube tops in Ziploc plastic bags. As they examined the other items, they came across a pair of purple panties stained with a blood-like substance. The detectives were concerned about other disturbing discoveries that might await them in their search of James's compound. The detectives noticed a piece of plywood on the ground. Recognizing its potential importance, they carefully removed the board to reveal a small chest freezer buried in the barn. When they opened the freezer, they detected a strong chemical odor similar to bleach, which heightened their suspicions. As they continued to investigate, they found other disturbing elements partially hidden among the straw bales. Among the items discovered was a dirty mattress pad. The presence of zip ties, duct tape, handcuffs, and keys intensified their concerns, as these items are often associated with kidnappings and other nefarious activities. Detectives collected all the evidence for DNA testing. James attempted to defend himself by claiming that the items were part of a pornographic entertainment business he was planning. However, the evidence gathered was far too overwhelming to support his explanation. The combination of evidence collected from the crime scene, along with the incriminating items, led to James' arrest for Sierra's murder. Sierra's family was shocked to learn that her abductor lived far from her home. This revelation left them with many questions, the most pressing of which was undoubtedly, where was she? Detectives conducted a thorough investigation of James' property, leaving no stone unturned. They meticulously searched every inch of the property to ensure a comprehensive examination. To aid in the search dogs were brought in to detect any potential human remains. During the investigation, detectives discovered a pond. Recognizing its potential significance, they carefully drained the pond to search for evidence that might have been concealed beneath the water. Detectives examined the insulation at the front of the attic. As the investigation continued, they expanded their search to neighboring properties, realizing that evidence might be scattered outside James's property. They patiently pursued leads in all directions. At that time, a farmer walking in his field noticed a strange area of corn that appeared to be covered. He decided to investigate further. As he approached the area, he saw a mound of dirt and immediately thought it could be a grave. The farmer's concerns were heightened by the recent events surrounding the search for Sierra. He wasted no time in calling the police, sharing his suspicions and the exact location. When the farmer called for help, the police arrived on the scene. They noticed a newly turned area of dirt, which led them to suspect it could be a grave. After carefully assessing the situation, the police began investigating the area, taking care not to disturb any potential evidence. The police conducted a thorough search of the scene, hoping to find clues about Sierra's whereabouts. However, despite their best efforts, their search was fruitless. Detectives expanded their search, using drones and helicopters to survey nearby farms in hopes of increasing air chances of finding Sierra. During their investigation, the detectives discovered an area of land covered with fresh corn. Their dogs detected the smell of decomposition, suggesting that this could be a crime scene. When investigators dug into the area, they discovered the remains of a person. Based on the evidence, it was believed that this was Sierra's body. Unfortunately, her hands and feet were bound, and there was a foreign object lodged in her mouth, making it difficult for her to breathe. The evidence suggested that she had died of asphyxiation. That night, Sierra's family received the devastating news they had feared: the police had found Sierra's lifeless body. The news was heartbreaking, and the family wept. It was a tragic moment, and they were overwhelmed with grief. A month after Sierra's abduction and murder, James Worley was indicted on 19 related charges, including kidnapping and aggravated murder. 2 years later, James went to trial on these charges. Despite overwhelming evidence against him, James pleaded not guilty to all counts. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning their verdict in James Worley's case. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, James was convicted on all counts related to Sierra's murder. The severity of the crime resulted in the imposition of the death penalty for James Worley. In conclusion, the harrowing case of Sierra Juffin has come to a tragic end, revealing the dark depths of human cruelty and the devastating impact it can have on a family and community. The relentless pursuit of justice led to the discovery of Sierra's remains and the conviction of James Worley, whose past offenses and heinous actions were instrumental in bringing him to justice. As Sierra's family continues to mourn their loss, they can find some measure of solace in knowing that James Worley has been held accountable. This case serves as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance, compassion, and the enduring fight for our justice in the face of profound tragedy. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30th, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to parents Lisa Carter and Jay Poston. He had a close and loving relationship with his three sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth. Ryan spent a significant portion of his teenage years traveling and studying abroad, attending schools in both Switzerland and the Philippines. Ryan was known for his adventurous nature, exceptional physical appearance, and charismatic personality, made him a standout among his peers. After high school, he attended Indiana University, where he majored in political science, history, and geography. Ryan graduated with honors in 2005. Following his family's tradition, Ryan decided to pursue a career in law. He enrolled in the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. Ryan had a profound respect for the legal profession, inspired by his grandfather and uncle, who were both attorneys. He had ambitious goals, one of which is the dream of owning a law firm. For the time being, Ryan worked in Cincinnati, Ohio, where he dedicated himself to offering affordable legal services to individuals who could not afford higher-priced attorneys. Although still young, Ryan had already built a considerable reputation. He attracted many clients seeking his advice and guidance. He worked diligently to ensure that everyone, regardless of their financial situation, had access to fair and competent legal representation. In 2011, Ryan has been through a painful breakup. He often visited his cousin Carissa in Lexington, Kentucky, seeking comfort and support. On one of these visits, his life underwent a dramatic change after an encounter with Shayna Michelle Hubers. Originally from Lexington, Kentucky, Shayna was a Southern, and is the epitome of a true Southern girl, known for her extroverted and sociable personality. Her warmth and charm drew people to her. After graduating from high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she studied psychology at the University of Kentucky. She then pursued her master's degree in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University. Despite their age gap, Ryan, 29, and Shayna, 21, couldn't deny their strong feelings for each other. Whenever Ryan visited his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he ended up spending more time with Shayna, and their connection deepened. As their relationship grew, Shayna began to spend most of her weekends in Highland Heights, Kentucky, where Ryan lived. She'd pack her bags, head to his home, and take care of him, cooking and cleaning for him. As time passed, their feelings grew deeper and deeper. Ryan introduced Shayna to his parents. She couldn't hide her excitement from her friends, raving about Ryan, and shares her dream of becoming Ryan's wife. However, the promising future of Ryan and Shayna came to a tragic end on October 12, 2012. On that day, Shayna called the authorities and reported that she had just killed her boyfriend, Ryan. According to Shayna, the incident began when Ryan attempted to physically abuse her. He allegedly dragged her out of the house when she tried to collect her belongings, and he confronted her with a gun. The situation became very tense and turned into a violent brawl, during which Shayna gained control of the firearm. Feeling intimidated by Ryan's, she panicked and pulled the trigger, shooting him. Believing Ryan was fatally wounded and wanting to end his suffering, she shot him several more times. Shayna believed Ryan's death was inevitable, so she wanted to end his suffering. After the shooting, Shayna placed the gun on a bookshelf and called 911 to report the incident. When officers arrived, they requested her to exit the apartment with her hands raised. Despite initial hesitation, but she complied, following the officer's instructions to lie face down on the ground. Throughout that time, Shayna appeared visibly upset. After handcuffing Shayna and placing her in the patrol vehicle, the officers entered the apartment. Inside, they found Ryan Poston dead on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Investigators then arrived and surveyed Ryan's condo. The condo appeared somewhat messy, but not unusually so for a 29-year-old man. Further investigation revealed that Ryan had a permit to carry a concealed weapon and owned firearms. The gun used by Shayna to shoot Ryan was identified as his own Sig Sauer semi-automatic pistol. Based on evidence from the apartment, investigators concluded Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna started shooting. Blood on the table confirmed this. However, several items on the dining table were untouched, contradicting Shayna's account of a struggle. Typically, a fight would have knocked these items out of place. Investigators thoroughly examined Ryan's apartment for clues. Simultaneously, officers went door to door in the neighborhood to gather more information from Ryan's neighbors. A neighbor named Nikki provided valuable information to the detective. She knows Shayna well and feels Shayna is more responsible for the relationship than Ryan. Nikki reported that the couple often had loud arguments that disturbed the neighborhood. Months earlier, Shayna had visited Nikki, crying and expressing her fear of Ryan. Shayna claimed that a violent altercation with Ryan had left her injured, and he threw her down the hallway. Nikki believed Shayna's story and urged her to report the incident to the police. However, Shayna decided not to do that. When Shayna was at the police station, detectives interviewed her about the shooting of boyfriend Ryan. Before they started the questioning, the officers told Shayna her rights, which informed her that she had the right to a lawyer. Shayna asked for a lawyer, so the questioning was put on hold. While she waited in the interrogation room, she filled out some paperwork, under the supervision of a detective. Shayna chose to speak with the detective despite asking for an attorney. When asked the name of the victim, Shayna showed no emotion, simply stating the man she killed, clearly referring to her long-term boyfriend, Ryan. During the interrogation, Shayna explained that she acted in self-defense. She claimed Ryan had physically attacked her, grabbing her throat and throwing her around their apartment. During a break in the interrogation, the detective stepped out of the room and another officer took over. Shayna then shared new information with the officer about her confrontation with Ryan. She stated that before the shooting, Ryan said mean and unpleasant things to her, calling her unhinged and taunting her while holding a gun. Shayna attributed Ryan's violent behavior that night to being under the influence of substances. She maintained her account of the incident leading up to the shooting, claiming Ryan was sitting at the dining table handling ammunition for his pistol. She caught him staring at her from across the table and believed this was a sign that he intended to kick her out of his condo. Shayna admitted to seizing the opportunity to grab the gun and shoot Ryan. In the midst of chaos, Shayna fired one shot at Ryan, hitting him. Shayna initially thought she needed to end his suffering, as he was twitching after the first shot, and proceeded to fire several more shots, ultimately resulting in Ryan's death. Shayna revealed in her confession that Ryan was self-conscious about his appearance, especially his nose, and had previously expressed a desire to get a nose job. With this knowledge, Shayna intentionally shot Ryan in the face, claiming she was granting his wish. Throughout the interrogation, Shayna revealed that she was worried her relationship would be affected if people found out her boyfriend was dead. Specifically, she feared that no one would want to marry her if they knew she had killed her boyfriend, even if it was in self-defense. After hearing her out, the detective arrested Shayna and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna appeared to be surprised by her arrest, insisting that she had only shot Ryan to protect herself, and apparently expecting a different outcome. In 2015, Shayna's trial started, and the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecutor began by comparing Shayna to Jodi Arias, another woman who had been accused of murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander. The similarities between the two cases were striking. This comparison increased the tension in the courtroom as everyone waited to see what would happen. The prosecutor argued that Shayna was fixated on her boyfriend, Ryan, and that he was all she could think about. According to the prosecution, Shayna's conversations were dominated by talk of Ryan. During the trial, the prosecutor presented a narrative of Ryan's intentions based on his friends' accounts. According to them, Ryan planned to end his relationship with Shayna and intentionally avoid her phone calls and texts. Despite these things, Shayna continued to show up at his condo in Highland Heights uninvited. The prosecution presented evidence that Ryan had plans to meet Audrey Bolt, the 2012 Miss Ohio, for a date on the night of the murder. This new information supported the prosecution's theory that Shayna was motivated by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's new relationship. Audrey testified that she had arranged to meet Ryan for drinks at a bar that night and waited for him, but he never arrived. It was only later that she discovered he had been shot and killed. During Shayna's trial, the prosecution showed the jury evidence that Ryan had often expressed his wish to end their relationship. Shortly before his death, Ryan called his father, Jay, for advice on how to handle the situation. Jay told Ryan to be kind to Shayna to avoid an ugly breakup. Despite Ryan wanting to break up with Shayna peacefully, but she continued to manipulate him. On the day of Ryan's death, evidence showed that he spent a lot of time texting with Shayna. In these texts, Ryan clearly told her that he didn't want to see her that weekend because he had other plans. Nevertheless, Shayna showed up at his condo uninvited, which was a common occurrence. The prosecution argued that during the argument, Ryan told Shayna it was over and she could no longer control him. This enraged Shayna, who then shot Ryan in a fit of rage. In trial, the prosecution played a video of Shayna's interrogation to show the jury that she was a cold-blooded killer. The video showed Shayna dancing and singing, seemingly unaffected by the departure of her boyfriend, Ryan. After killing a loved one in self-defense, most people would be extremely upset, crying and overwhelmed by what they had done. By showing the video, the prosecution argued that Shayna was a very emotionless person and did not feel remorse for what she did, implying that she didn't act like someone who had killed in self-defense. However, this explanation is not objective and depends on the jury's perspective. The interrogation video was a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case against Shayna. However, it was not the only evidence presented during the trial. Shayna's defense team stuck to a consistent story throughout the trial. They claimed that Ryan was the one who behaved erratically and violently on the night of the incident, which ultimately led to Shayna shooting him. To support this claim, the defense team described Ryan's state of mind. They alleged that the combination of medications he was taking, including anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines, is the cause. To strengthen their argument, Shayna's attorneys presented autopsy results to the jury, prove that Ryan was using these drugs at the time of his death. This evidence suggested that Ryan's actions may have been influenced by the medications he is taking. The defense also called an expert toxicologist to testify that combining anti-anxiety medication and amphetamines could lead to violent and paranoid behavior. The goal of this testimony was to create a plausible explanation for Shayna's actions and then prove that she killed Ryan in self-defense. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution was concerned that she would be acquitted because she was an intelligent, young, and beautiful woman. They worried that her self-defense claims might sway the jury. However, on April 23, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna Michelle Hubers of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the sentencing hearing in August 2015, Shayna continued to blame Ryan for his death, which outraged his friends and family. Despite the evidence presented during the trial, Shayna maintained her innocence and refused to take responsibility for her actions. In Kentucky, a defendant who is a victim of domestic violence may be eligible for parole after serving 20% of their sentence. However, the judge did not grant Shayna this reduced parole, citing that she had committed a premeditated murder. Shayna was sentenced to 40 years in prison and will be eligible for parole in 17 years, in 2032, when she is 41 years old. Shayna appealed her sentence and was granted a new trial in August 2016. The appeal was granted because one of the jurors had a felony conviction, which is against Kentucky law, as felons are not allowed to serve on juries. In August 2018, after a 4-month delay, Shayna's second trial began. During opening arguments, Shayna's defense attorney stated that she had made every effort to please Ryan for the entire time they were together, a year and a half. But in the end, their love story encountered problems. According to the defense team, on the first night Shayna and Ryan met, he committed physical and sexual violence against her. This incident had a profound and lasting effect on Shayna, causing her to take several weeks to respond to Ryan's messages afterward. The defense claimed that Shayna's history of trauma began in high school when she was sexually assaulted. This led to her struggling with alcohol addiction and sexual promiscuity for many years. Her defense team argued that this traumatic experience significantly influenced her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense strategy aimed to create a sympathetic of Shayna by sharing her troubled past. They sought to prove that Shayna was not fully in control of her actions on the night of the murder. The defense hoped to show that Shayna's behavior was the result of a mix of factors. These factors included her history of abuse and her toxic relationship with Ryan. The goal was to show that Shayna was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of Ryan, rather than a cold-blooded killer. The defense argued that Shayna's actions were not driven by a desire for revenge or financial gain. Instead, they were the result of years of abuse she suffered at the hands of Ryan. Shayna's defense attorney argued that Ryan's constant criticism about her weight and chest size, as well as his pressure on her to get breast enlargement, significantly affected her self-esteem. The defense claimed that this criticism, along with the strain in their sexual relationship, contributed to Shayna's feelings of inadequacy. The defense presented evidence that Shayna had sought medical help to improve their romantic life, getting an injection to address their sexual difficulties. However, Ryan's rejection and lack of interest made the problems in their relationship worse, leaving Shayna feeling frustrated and isolated. Additionally, the defense alleged that Ryan would often end things with Shayna and then talk to other women, further straining the problems in their relationship. During their opening statement, the prosecution told the jury that they wouldn't portray Ryan as a perfect boyfriend. However, they made it clear that he wasn't abusive. They claimed that Shayna shot and killed Ryan not in self-defense. The prosecution alleged that Shayna shot Ryan because he had ended their relationship on the night of the incident. Ryan had decided it was time to break up with Shayna because she would not leave him alone. According to the prosecution, Shayna's repeated returns to Ryan after he ended things demonstrated her inability to move on from the relationship. During the trial, the prosecution showed text messages from Shayna to her friends. These messages stated that the intimate activities between Shayna and Ryan had strengthened their relationship. However, when Shayna took the stand in her own defense during her second trial, she disagreed. She claimed that these activities had actually pushed them further apart. In another set of text messages, Shayna had asked to have sex, but Ryan was taking antidepressants. The medication side effects had reduced his sex drive. However, when Shayna testified, she alleged that Ryan had forced her into having sex. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Shayna Michelle Hubers of murdering Ryan Poston for the second time. Despite conflicting testimonies and evidence, they upheld their initial verdict. During the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally shared her daughter's singing talent and how it earned her multiple college scholarships. Choked with emotion, she asked the jury to consider the possibility of parole for Shayna. However, she acknowledged this didn't lessen the grief and suffering that Ryan's family was experiencing. Shayna Michelle Hubers was sentenced to life in prison without parole. She must serve at least 17 years before being considered for parole in 2032. She is serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky.